A brilliant woman stood before Naples' most feared crime lord with an impossible demand: spare her father's life or watch his empire burn from within. Dr. Elena Vitale had studied Adrian Romano for weeks, mapping his movements, analyzing his patterns, learning the language of power that ruled southern Italy's underworld. She knew the statistics. No one who stole from Romano lived to see another dawn. But Elena wasn't begging for mercy. She was offering something far more dangerous: her mind. If you're ready to witness how a linguistics researcher became the queen of the criminal underworld, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The August heat pressed against Naples like a judgment, turning the ancient city's stone streets into rivers of shimmering air. Dr. Elena Vitale stood in the shadow of a Baroque fountain, her cotton dress clinging to her spine, her hands trembling despite her determination to keep them still. She had been waiting for 47 minutes, watching the entrance to Ristorante Bella Vista with the focused intensity she usually reserved for ancient manuscripts and coded texts. Today, she wasn't hunting linguistic patterns in dead languages. Today, she was hunting a man who could end her father's life with a single word. Adrian Romano arrived at exactly 1:47 p.m., 3 minutes earlier than his usual pattern. Elena had studied him for 23 days, mapping his routines with the same precision she applied to her academic research. She knew he took this route every Tuesday and Thursday. She knew he preferred the corner table that offered a view of both entrances. She knew that he traveled with 4 men, 2 visible, 2 hidden, and that his patience for interruptions was measured in seconds, not minutes. She also knew that if she failed today, her father would be dead by morning. Elena stepped from the fountain's shadow just as Adrian's lead security man, a boulder of a human named Marco, moved to open the restaurant door. Her timing had to be perfect, close enough to intercept, not so close as to seem like a threat. "Signor Romano," her voice carried across the narrow street, steady despite the terror screaming through her veins. "I need 5 minutes of your time." The world seemed to freeze. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket. The second visible guard shifted his weight, blocking Adrian from view. Somewhere behind her, Elena sensed the hidden protection detail converging on her position. But Adrian Romano held up one hand, and everything stopped. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders. The photographs she'd studied didn't capture the way he moved, like a predator so confident in his dominance that he had nothing left to prove. His suit was charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, and his dark eyes swept over her with the kind of assessment that missed nothing. "You have 30 seconds to explain," he said, his voice surprisingly quiet. "Why I shouldn't have you removed from this street." Elena's research had taught her one critical truth about Adrian Romano. He respected courage more than submission, directness more than flattery. Men and women who groveled before him were crushed. Those who stood their ground sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, earned his attention. "Because I'm the daughter of Luca Vitale," she said clearly, "and I'm here to negotiate for his life." Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Not surprise, men like him were never surprised, but interest. Marco tensed, waiting for an order that didn't come. "Your father," Adrian said slowly, each word measured, "stole 400,000 euros from one of my operations. He thought he could hide it in construction invoices and equipment purchases that never happened. He thought I wouldn't notice." "He was wrong," Elena said. "About all of it." "Yes." Adrian's gaze never wavered. "He was, and now there are consequences. I'm not here to beg for mercy." "No?" One dark eyebrow rose slightly. "Then what are you here for, Dr. Vitale?" The use of her title wasn't accidental. He'd researched her, just as she'd researched him. Of course he had. Adrian Romano didn't operate on incomplete information. "I'm here to offer you something worth more than 400,000 euros, Elena said. "I'm here to offer you my expertise." For a long moment, Adrian simply looked at her. The street around them had emptied. Not obviously, but people had developed an instinct for when Adrian Romano needed space. Even the tourists with their cameras and guidebooks had somehow found other places to be. "You're a linguistics researcher," Adrian said finally. "You study dead languages and ancient texts. What possible use could I have for that?" This was the moment. Elena had practiced this pitch in her mirror for 3 days, refining every word, every pause, every gesture. She knew she would only get one chance. "I don't just study dead languages," she said. "I study patterns. Communication patterns, deception patterns, the ways people hide meaning in plain sight. I can look at a conversation, written or spoken, and tell you who's lying, who's planning betrayal, who's operating outside their normal behavioral baseline." Adrian's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation behind his eyes. "I can read transcripts of phone calls and tell you which of your associates are skimming profits," Elena continued, her confidence growing as she moved into her area of expertise. "I can analyze text messages and identify who's making deals with your competitors. I can look at the language patterns in your organization's communications and find the traitors before they become problems." "And you think this skill is worth your father's life?" "I think it's worth more than that," Elena said boldly. "I think it's worth protecting my entire family. And I think that if you give me one chance to prove what I can do, you'll agree." Marco shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how people spoke to Adrian Romano. This wasn't how anyone spoke to the man who controlled half of southern Italy's underground economy. But Adrian seemed almost amused. "One test," he said. "You fail, your father dies tonight instead of next week. You succeed." He paused, considering. "We'll discuss terms." "What's the test?" Adrian reached into his jacket. Marco and the other guards instantly relaxed, confirming what Elena had suspected. They were more worried about threats to him than from him, and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "This is a transcript of a phone conversation between two of my associates," he said, handing it to her. "On the surface, they're discussing a shipment of restaurant supplies. You have 4 hours to tell me what they're really discussing, who's lying, and what they're planning." Elena took the paper, her mind already racing. 4 hours wasn't much time, but it might be enough. "Where should I deliver my analysis?" Adrian smiled then, a brief expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Marco will take you to a cafe 3 blocks from here. He'll wait. If you run, your father dies. If you contact anyone, your father dies. If your analysis is wrong or worthless..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. "Understood," Elena said. "Dr. Vitale." Adrian's voice stopped her as she turned to leave. "I hope your confidence isn't misplaced. For your father's sake." The cafe was small and nearly empty, tucked into a side street that tourists never found. Marco positioned himself near the door, a silent sentinel who ordered nothing and said nothing. Elena chose a table in the corner, spread out the transcript, and began to read. The conversation appeared innocuous at first glance. "The tomatoes arrived this morning. 20 crates, like you ordered." "Good. And the olive oil?" "Still waiting on the supplier. Should be here by Friday." "Make sure it's the good stuff. No substitutions." "Of course. When have I ever let you down?" Elena read it 3 more times, then pulled out her notebook and began to work. The first thing she noticed was the response time. In natural conversation, people paused at predictable intervals, thinking time, processing time, the rhythm of human speech. But in this transcript, the pauses were wrong. Too quick in some places, suggesting rehearsed answers. Too long in others, suggesting careful word choice. Someone was lying. She began mapping the linguistic markers. The first speaker used contractions naturally, should be here, instead of should be arriving here. The second speaker's language was more formal, more controlled. That could mean nothing. People had different speech patterns, but combined with the timing issues, it suggested stress. Then she noticed the pronouns. "When have I ever let you down?" Not, "When have we ever had problems?" Not, "When has the supplier ever been late?" The personal pronoun, the emphasis on individual reliability, suggested defensiveness. The speaker was anticipating doubt. Elena dove deeper into the analysis, her years of training taking over. She examined verb-tense consistency, looking for places where the speaker slipped between present and future tense in ways that suggested deception. She studied the references to specific items, tomatoes, olive oil, and noticed that neither speaker ever clarified quantities, delivery addresses, or payment terms. Real business conversations included those details. Coded conversations avoided them. 2 hours into her analysis, she found the critical break. Make sure it's the good stuff. No substitutions. The phrase good stuff appeared nowhere else in the transcript. It was colloquial, casual, completely different from the formal tone the second speaker had maintained throughout. That meant it carried weight. It was a code phrase, something both speakers understood had specific meaning. And no substitution suggested that someone had previously attempted to substitute something. In the context of coded conversation, that meant someone had tried to cheat, to replace the real product with something inferior. Elena sat back, her heart pounding. She had it. 3 hours and 42 minutes after Adrian Romano had handed her the transcript, Marco's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then looked at Elena. "Time to go," he said. Adrian's villa sat on a cliff overlooking the Bay of Naples, a stunning piece of architecture that probably had its own Wikipedia page. Elena barely noticed the view. She was too focused on the man sitting behind an antique desk in a study lined with books that actually looked red. "You have my analysis?" Adrian asked. Elena placed her notebook on his desk. "The conversation isn't about restaurant supplies. It's about a drug shipment that was compromised. The first speaker, I'm calling him Speaker A, is reporting that the shipment arrived, but something was wrong with it. 20 kilos instead of crates of tomatoes. The second speaker, Speaker B, is asking about payment, disguised as olive oil." Adrian's expression remained neutral. "Continue." "Speaker B is lying," Elena said with confidence. "The language pattern shows stress, defensiveness, and overcompensation. The phrase, 'When have I ever let you down?' is a classic marker of someone who knows they're about to be caught. And the reference to no substitution suggests that Speaker B has been cutting the product with something else, probably to skim profits." She opened her notebook to show her detailed analysis. "Here's where the timing breaks down. Here's where the pronoun usage suggests defensiveness. And here," she pointed to a specific line, "here's where Speaker B accidentally uses future tense when describing something that supposedly already happened. He's planning something, probably planning to run before you figure out what he's done." Adrian picked up her notebook, reading through her analysis with the same intensity she'd seen him use on the street. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute. Then he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Salvatore," he said quietly, "I need you to bring me Giacomo. Now." He released the button and looked at Elena. "Speaker B is a lieutenant named Giacomo Russo. He's been with my organization for 8 years. I would have trusted him with my life." "Would have?" Elena asked. "You just identified him as a traitor. If you're right, he's a dead man. If you're wrong..." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Well, let's see if you're right." 20 minutes later, Giacomo Russo was brought into the study by 2 men who looked like they could bench press a car. He was in his 40s, well-dressed, confused about why he'd been summoned. "Adrian," he said nervously. "What's this about?" "Tell me about the shipment that arrived this morning," Adrian said calmly. "The shipment?" Giacomo's eyes darted to Elena, then back to Adrian. "It was fine. Everything is ordered. No problems?" "No problems." Adrian placed the transcript on his desk. "This is a recording of your conversation with Marco this morning. Would you like to revise your answer?" The color drained from Giacomo's face. "I can explain." "You've been cutting the product," Adrian said, his voice still dangerously quiet. "For how long?" Giacomo's mouth opened and closed. Then, in the face of absolute certainty, he broke. 6 months, he whispered. "I was careful. I never took too much. You thought I wouldn't notice." Adrian stood slowly. "You thought you could steal from me and I'd be too stupid, too distracted, too trusting to see it. Please, Adrian, I have a family. So does everyone who's ever betrayed me." Adrian walked around the desk, and Giacomo actually shrank back. "Did you think about them before you decided to steal? Did you think about the consequences?" Elena watched, her heart pounding. This was the world she'd stepped into, a world where betrayal meant death, where mercy was weakness, where men begged for lives that were already forfeit. "Take him to the warehouse," Adrian said to the 2 enforcers. "I'll deal with him later." As Giacomo was dragged from the room, still pleading, still begging, Adrian turned to Elena. "You were right," he said, "about all of it. The timeline matches. Giacomo has been skimming for months, probably longer. We're still calculating how much he stole, but it's well over 2 million euros. Elena's hands were shaking. She'd been right. She'd proven her value. But she'd also just condemned a man to death. Your father's debt is forgiven, Adrian said. Consider it paid in full. Relief crashed through her, so intense she had to grip the edge of the desk to stay upright. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. Adrian moved to the window, looking out over the bay. You proved you can identify one traitor, but my organization is large, and treachery is a constant threat. I need someone with your skills on a permanent basis. Elena's relief turned to ice. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to hire you, Dr. Vitale. I want you to analyze communications, review transcripts, identify threats before they become problems. I'll pay you well, far more than any university could offer, and I'll guarantee your family's safety. And if I say no? Adrian turned to face her, and for the first time she saw something almost like respect in his eyes. Then you walk out of here free and clear, debt paid, no obligations. I don't force people to work for me. He paused. But I think you'll say yes. Why? Because you're brilliant, and you know it. Because you've spent your entire life studying patterns in dead languages when you could be identifying patterns in living organizations. Because the look in your eyes when you solved that transcript wasn't fear or disgust. It was excitement. Adrian moved closer. You loved the puzzle, Dr. Vitale. You loved knowing that your mind, your intelligence, could see things no one else could see. He wasn't wrong, and that terrified her. I need time to think, Elena said. You have 24 hours. Adrian walked to his desk and wrote something on a card. This is a private number. Call me with your answer. Elena took the cards, her mind spinning. And my father? Safe. I keep my word, Dr. Vitale. Always. Elena's apartment was small and cluttered with books, the home of someone who spent more time reading than cleaning. She sat at her kitchen table, the card with Adrian's number in front of her, a glass of wine she couldn't taste beside her. Her father was safe. That was what mattered. She'd saved him, proven her worth, and walked away free. She should have been celebrating. Instead, she kept seeing Giacomo's face as he was dragged from the room. Instead, she kept feeling the rush of excitement when her analysis had been proven correct. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague at the university. Heard you missed the faculty meeting. Everything okay? Everything was not okay. Elena had spent her entire career in the safe, respectable world of academia. She studied ancient texts, taught eager students, published papers in prestigious journals. It was a good life, a safe life. A boring life, whispered a voice in the back of her mind. When was the last time she'd felt the thrill she'd experienced today? When was the last time her skills had mattered in a way that was immediate, visceral, real? She loved her research, but she also knew that her latest paper on Etruscan linguistic evolution would be read by maybe 200 people, cited by maybe 10, and forgotten within a year. Today, her analysis had mattered. Today, her mind had been a weapon. She picked up her phone and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. Adrian answered on the first ring. Dr. Vitale. I have conditions, Elena said. I'm listening. My family stays protected no matter what happens. You guarantee their safety in writing, legal documents, the works. Agreed. I don't participate in violence. I analyze, I advise, but I don't pull triggers, and I don't give orders that result in people dying. There was a pause. I can't promise that your analyses won't lead to consequences, Dr. Vitale. That's the nature of this work. I understand that, but I don't give the orders. I provide information. What you do with it is your responsibility, not mine. Agreed, Adrian said. What else? I need access to your full communications network. Phone transcripts, text messages, email, everything. I can't do this job with limited data. You'll have it. Elena took a deep breath. And I want to understand the operation. I can't identify threats if I don't understand the structure, the business, the relationships. I need to know how your organization works. Another pause, longer this time. That's asking for a significant level of trust, Dr. Vitale. You're asking me to put my reputation, my career, and potentially my freedom on the line. Trust runs both ways. She heard what might have been a quiet laugh. Fair enough. When can you start? I need to settle things at the university. 2 weeks. 1 week, Adrian countered. I'll have Marco pick you up Monday morning. Bring whatever you need to work. Computers, books, whatever. You'll have an office here at the villa. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own voice. Monday morning. Welcome to the organization, Dr. Vitale. He hung up before she could respond. Elena sat in her kitchen, staring at her phone, wondering what exactly she'd just agreed to. She'd walked into Adrian Romano's world to save her father's life. Now she'd agreed to stay there, to work for him, to use her skills in service of an organization she barely understood. She should have felt terrified. Instead, she felt alive. The week passed in a blur of arrangements and lies. Elena told her department chair she needed a leave of absence for family reasons, not entirely untrue, and delegated her research projects to colleagues who were thrilled to have access to her data. She packed her reference books, her laptop, her research notes. She didn't tell anyone the truth. How could she? I'm going to work for a crime lord wasn't exactly something you shared over coffee. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Marco picked her up in a black Mercedes at exactly 7 a.m., loaded her boxes into the trunk without comment, and drove her to the villa in silence. Adrian met her at the door, looking sharp in a navy suit despite the early hour. Dr. Vitale, he said, let me show you your office. He led her through marble hallways hung with art that was probably worth more than her annual salary, up a curved staircase, and into a large room that looked out over the bay. The space was already set up with a desk, multiple monitors, filing cabinets, and a coffee station. You'll have secure access to our communications network, Adrian explained, handing her a tablet. Everything runs through encrypted channels. The files are organized by division: shipping, construction, imports, financial services. Start wherever makes sense to you. Elena looked at the tablet, then at the room, then at the man who just handed her access to his entire criminal empire. You really trust me with all of this? You had a week to go to the police, Dr. Vitale. You could have recorded our conversation, gathered evidence, played the hero. Instead, you're here. Adrian's dark eyes met hers. Besides, if you betray me, I'll know. That's what you do, remember? You spot betrayal in communication patterns. I'm betting you can't hide what you can identify. He was right, and they both knew it. I'll start with the financial division, Elena said. Money flows are usually the clearest indicators of problems. Good instinct. Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Tonight, there's a dinner meeting with several of my senior lieutenants. I'd like you to attend. To observe? To learn. You said you needed to understand the organization. This is where you start. After he left, Elena sat at her new desk and opened the tablet. Files upon files of communications, transactions, reports. It was overwhelming and exhilarating in equal measure. She pulled up the financial division's recent message history and began to read. Within 2 hours, she'd identified 3 anomalies. Within 4, she'd mapped a pattern of suspicious transactions that pointed to either money laundering or embezzlement. By lunch, she was completely absorbed, her academic life feeling like something from another person's history. The dinner that night was held in a private room at a restaurant Elena had read about, but never imagined entering. 15 men sat around a long table, their ages ranging from 30 to 60, their manner ranging from deferential to cautiously confident. Adrian sat at the head of the table, and he'd positioned Elena to his right. Gentlemen, he said, this is Dr. Elena Vitale. She'll be working as a strategic analyst for our organization. You'll provide her with whatever access she requests. The men looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. A woman in their world was already unusual. An outsider was dangerous. Both combined was almost unprecedented. What kind of analysis? Asked a silver-haired man Elena's notes identified as Stefano, head of the shipping division. Communication analysis, Elena said clearly. I study patterns in how people communicate to identify deception, betrayal, and operational inefficiencies. You're a spy, said another man. Luca, construction division. I'm an analyst, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Luca's tone was challenging. Sounds like you'll be reading our messages, looking for dirt. I'll be looking for threats to this organization, Elena said, keeping her voice calm. If you're loyal, you have nothing to worry about. If you're not... She let the sentence hang. Adrian's expression showed the barest hint of approval. The dinner proceeded with discussions of shipments, territories, payments, and problems. Elena listened more than she spoke, absorbing the dynamics, the relationships, the subtle hierarchies. She noticed who deferred to whom, who interrupted whom, who exchanged glances when certain topics arose. Halfway through the meal, Stefano mentioned a problem with a delayed shipment. "The warehouse in Salerno is holding up distribution," he said. "They're claiming port authority inspections, but I think it's just incompetence." "Have you verified that?" Adrian asked. "I've made calls, but—" "Dr. Vitale," Adrian interrupted, looking at Elena. "What do you think?" Every eye at the table turned to her. Elena's heart kicked into high gear, but she forced herself to appear calm. "I'd need to see the communications," she said. "But if the delay is legitimate, the language will reflect frustration and problem-solving. If it's a cover story, the language will be defensive and vague." "Pull up the messages," Adrian told Stefano. "Share them with Dr. Vitale." 10 minutes later, Elena had her answer. "It's not incompetence," she said, looking up from her phone. "The warehouse manager is stalling because he's negotiating with someone else, probably offering them priority access in exchange for payment. Look at the timing of his responses and the lack of specific problem details. He's not trying to solve the delay. He's trying to justify it." Adrian's expression darkened. "Stefano, replace him. Tonight." The meal continued, but something had shifted. The men at the table looked at Elena with new wariness, new respect. She wasn't just Adrian's curiosity anymore. She was useful. She was dangerous. As the dinner broke up, Adrian walked Elena to the car. "You did well tonight," he said. "I made enemies." "You made them nervous. That's different." He opened the car door for her. "In this world, Dr. Vitale, it's better to be feared than loved." "I'm not trying to be either," Elena said. "I'm trying to survive." "Then you're already smarter than most." The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Elena would arrive at the villa each morning, spend hours analyzing communications, and report her findings to Adrian in the evening. She identified a dock worker stealing shipments, a restaurant manager skimming protection payments, and a lieutenant running an unauthorized side business. Each discovery tightened her value to the organization. Each discovery pushed her deeper into a world she'd never imagined inhabiting. She saw Adrian almost daily now, and she was beginning to understand him in ways that had nothing to do with linguistics. He was ruthless, yes, but also strategic. He valued loyalty above almost everything else. He kept his word, even when it cost him. And beneath the reputation of the feared crime lord, there was a man who'd built an empire from nothing and carried the weight of it alone. One evening, as she was preparing to leave, Adrian stopped her. "Tomorrow night," he said, "there's a situation that requires my presence in Sorrento. I'd like you to come with me." "What kind of situation?" "A meeting with a potential business partner. I want you to read him. Tell me if he's trustworthy." Elena hesitated. "That's different from analyzing written communications." "Can you do it?" Could she? Reading people in real time, without the ability to review and analyze at her own pace, was far more challenging. But it was also the logical next step. "Yes," she said, "I can do it." Adrian smiled, that rare expression that suggested approval. "Good. We leave at 6. As Elena left the villa that night, she caught her reflection in one of the massive mirrors in the hallway. She barely recognized herself. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a university professor, living a safe and predictable life. Now she was driving back to her apartment from a crime lord's villa, preparing to attend a high-stakes meeting with dangerous people. Her phone buzzed with a text from her department chair. "We miss you. Any idea when you'll be back?" Elena stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "Not sure yet, taking more time." She wasn't sure she'd ever go back. That thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like freedom. The next evening, Elena dressed more carefully than usual, choosing a simple black dress that was elegant without being attention-grabbing. Marco drove her and Adrian to Sorrento in the Mercedes, the coastline spectacular in the fading light. "Tell me about this potential partner," Elena said. "Antonio Savastano. He controls the import business in Salerno and wants to expand into Naples. He's proposing a partnership that would give him access to our distribution network in exchange for a percentage of his profits." "You don't trust him." "I don't know him well enough to trust him," Adrian corrected. "That's why you're here." The meeting was held at a clifftop restaurant with stunning views and prices that could feed a family for a month. Antonio Savastano was already waiting when they arrived, a man in his 50s with expensive clothes and a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Adrian," he said, standing to shake hands, "thank you for meeting with me." "Antonio, this is Dr. Elena Vitale, one of my advisors." Antonio's eyes flicked to Elena with surprise and curiosity. "A pleasure." As they settled into conversation about territories, percentages, and logistics, Elena listened. She watched Antonio's facial expressions, his hand gestures, the way he leaned forward when discussing potential profits and leaned back when discussing risks. She noted his word choices, his speech patterns, the places where he hesitated. "I think we could accomplish great things together," Antonio was saying. "Your network in Naples, my supply chains in Salerno, it's a natural partnership." "What about the Russo family?" Adrian asked. "They currently control most of the Salerno imports. How do you plan to manage that conflict?" Antonio's smile widened. "The Russos are old-fashioned. They don't adapt. I've been slowly taking their market share for 2 years. In another 6 months, they'll be irrelevant." Elena noticed the timing of that statement. Too quick, too confident. She also noticed that Antonio had shifted to future tense when discussing something he'd claimed was already happening. "What's your timeline for this partnership?" Adrian asked. "I'd like to begin within the month," Antonio said. "Strike while the opportunity is hot." There it was. The push for urgency. Classic pressure tactic. The dinner continued, but Elena had seen enough. When Antonio excused himself to take a phone call, Adrian leaned toward her. "Well?" "He's lying," Elena said quietly. "Not about everything, but about the Russo family. He hasn't been taking their market share. He's probably trying to break into a territory they still control. He wants your network because he needs the muscle to push the Russos out." "You're sure?" "Look at his language patterns. When he talks about his own success, he uses past tense and specific examples. When he talks about the Russos' decline, it's all future tense and vague predictions. He's selling you a story, not reporting facts." Adrian sat back, his expression thoughtful. When Antonio returned, all smiles, Adrian's demeanor had shifted subtly. "I appreciate the proposal," Adrian said, "but I need more information before committing to a partnership. Specifically, I need independent verification of your current market position." Antonio's smile faltered. "I can provide documentation." "I'm sure you can. Take 2 weeks to compile a complete picture of your operations. Then we'll talk again." It was a polite dismissal, and Antonio knew it. He recovered quickly, but Elena saw the flash of frustration in his eyes. On the drive back to Naples, Adrian was quiet for a long time. "You saved me from a bad partnership tonight," he finally said. "Antonio would have used my network to start a war with the Russos, then disappeared when things got dangerous." "How do you know?" "Because I made some calls while he was on the phone. You were right, the Russos still control Salerno. Antonio is nobody trying to become somebody at my expense." Elena looked out at the dark coastline, processing what had just happened. She'd read a man she'd never met before, identified his deception in real time, and potentially prevented a conflict that could have cost lives. Her skill set wasn't just useful to Adrian's organization, it was invaluable. "Tomorrow," Adrian said, "I want you at the morning briefing with my senior staff. Your insights are too valuable to wait for written reports." Elena nodded, but inside she felt the last connection to her old life finally snap. She wasn't a professor on leave anymore. She wasn't playing at this. She was Adrian Romano's strategic analyst, his advisor, his secret weapon. And despite every rational reason to be terrified, she'd never felt more powerful in her life. 3 months into her new role, Elena had become indispensable. She arrived at the villa before dawn most mornings, often finding Adrian already in his office, reviewing reports while the rest of Naples still slept. Their working relationship had developed into something efficient and seamless. He would present her with situations, she would analyze them, and together they would decide on action. But lately, something had shifted. Elena noticed it in small moments. The way Adrian's gaze would linger on her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he stood closer than necessary when reviewing documents together. The way conversations that should have been purely professional somehow drifted into territory that felt dangerous and electric. She told herself it meant nothing. She was an employee, nothing more. The tension she felt was just the intensity of their work environment, the shared secrets, the constant proximity to danger. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. "You're distracted," Adrian said one morning, startling her out of her thoughts. Elena looked up from the transcript she'd been pretending to read for the past 10 minutes. "I'm fine." "You've been staring at the same page for a quarter hour." He moved around his desk to stand beside her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She forced herself to focus on the document. "I was just thinking about the Castellano situation." It wasn't entirely a lie. The Castellano family had been making moves into territory Adrian controlled, testing boundaries, probing for weakness. Elena had been analyzing their communications for weeks, building a profile of their strategy and intentions. "You think they're planning something?" "I know they are." Elena pulled up a file on her tablet. "Look at the pattern of their movements over the past month. They're not just testing, they're preparing for a coordinated push. Within 2 weeks, maybe 3, they'll make a major move." Adrian studied the data she'd compiled, his expression darkening. "What kind of move?" "My best guess? They'll hit multiple locations simultaneously. Your shipping operations, your financial centers, maybe even some of the restaurants. They want to make a statement, show that you're vulnerable. They're going to regret that." Elena had seen this side of Adrian before. The cold calculation, the absolute certainty that any threat would be met with overwhelming force. It should have frightened her. Instead, she found it mesmerizing. "There's something else," she said quietly. "One of their communications mentioned a meeting scheduled for Friday night. Location encrypted, but the language suggests it's important, possibly bringing in outside support." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Where?" "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it." He placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that could have been professional but somehow wasn't. "Good work, Elena." It was the first time he'd used her first name instead of Dr. Vitale. The intimacy of it sent electricity down her spine. "I should get back to the analysis," she managed. Adrian's hand lingered for a moment longer before he moved away. "Join me for dinner tonight. We need to discuss strategy." It wasn't a request, but it also wasn't quite a command. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. After he left, she sat alone in her office, her heart racing. This was becoming complicated in ways that had nothing to do with linguistics or crime families. She was developing feelings for a man who operated outside every law she'd been raised to respect, who wielded power with a ruthlessness that should have repelled her. But it didn't repel her. That was the problem. The afternoon briefing with Adrian's senior staff had become routine. Elena would present her findings, answer questions, and field the mixture of respect and resentment that her presence inspired. Today's meeting focused on the Castellano threat. "We should hit them first," Luca argued, his fist striking the table for emphasis. "Show them what happens when they challenge us." "That's exactly what they want," Elena countered. "They're trying to provoke a reaction, make you look aggressive and unstable. It'll give them justification to bring in allies." "So we do nothing?" Stefano's tone was skeptical. "We prepare," Adrian said quietly. "We fortify our key locations, increase security, and we wait for them to make their move. When they do, we respond with precision, not rage." "And the meeting on Friday?" asked Marco. Adrian looked at Elena. "We'll know more about that soon." After the meeting, Elena returned to her office and dove back into the Castellano communications. There had to be a clue somewhere, a slip in their operational security, a pattern that revealed the meeting location. She worked through lunch, through the afternoon, barely noticing the hours passing. It was after 7 when she finally found it. A casual mention of the old place in a message that otherwise discussed completely unrelated business. Cross-referenced with historical data about Castellano family properties, Elena identified 3 possible locations. One of them, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, had been the site of a previous family gathering 5 years ago. That had to be it. She was reaching for her phone to call Adrian when her office door opened. He stood in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened, looking as tired as she felt. "You missed dinner," he said. Elena glanced at the clock in surprise. "I'm sorry, I was working on—" "I know. Marco told me you haven't left your office all day." Adrian moved into the room, closing the door behind him. You need to eat. I found the meeting location. That stopped him. Where? Elena showed him her analysis, walking through the logic that had led her to the warehouse. Adrian listened intently, occasionally asking questions, his mind clearly processing strategy even as she explained her methodology. This is excellent work, he said when she finished. We'll send a surveillance team tomorrow. I want to go with them. Adrian's expression hardened. No. I can read the situation in real time, identify Elena. The use of her first name again, combined with the firmness in his tone, silenced her. You're too valuable to risk in field operations. If something went wrong, if you were captured or hurt, I'm not fragile. I know you're not. His voice softened slightly. But you're also not trained for this kind of work. Analyzing communications is not the same as being present when violence might erupt. You'll be there, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. You won't let anything happen to me. Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, surprise perhaps, or something deeper. You have that much faith in me? I trust you. The words came out before she could stop them, and they hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that went far beyond professional confidence. Adrian moved closer, and Elena's breath caught. They'd been in close proximity countless times, but this felt different. This felt charged with something that had been building for months. You shouldn't trust me, he said quietly. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've seen you keep your word even when it cost you. I've seen you choose strategy over rage, calculation over impulse. You're not what the world thinks you are. I've done terrible things. I know. She held his gaze. And I'm here anyway. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. Adrian's hand came up to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. This is a mistake, he murmured. Probably. But neither of them moved away. The moment stretched, taut with possibility and restraint. Then Adrian's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. He stepped back, his expression shifting into the controlled mask she knew so well. That's Marco, he said, glancing at the screen. There's a situation at the port. Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Go, I'll finish the surveillance plan. Adrian paused at the door. Elena. Yes? Be careful. The closer you get to this world, the harder it becomes to leave. After he was gone, Elena sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly. What was she doing? She'd entered this world to save her father, stayed for the intellectual challenge, but now she was developing feelings for a man who represented everything she should have opposed. Except Adrian Romano wasn't simple enough to oppose. He was complex, contradictory, brilliant in ways that matched her own intelligence. When they worked together, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced in her academic life. Her colleagues had respected her research, but they'd never truly understood her. The hunger for puzzles that mattered, for analysis that had immediate visceral consequences. Adrian understood, and that was more dangerous than any criminal enterprise. The surveillance operation on Friday evening confirmed Elena's analysis. The Castellano family met at the abandoned warehouse, and Adrian's people documented everything, who attended, what was discussed, and most importantly, that they were indeed planning a coordinated strike for the following week. They're bringing in support from Rome, Adrian told Elena the next morning, his expression grim. Antonio Savastano was there, despite my rejection of his partnership proposal. He's allied with the Castellanos, using them to get at me. You need to respond before they strike, Elena said. I know, but I need to do it in a way that doesn't start a war we can't win. He looked at her intently. I need your mind on this, Elena. How do we neutralize the threat without creating a bigger problem? Elena had been thinking about this all night. You said Antonio wants legitimacy, wants to be seen as a major player. What if instead of attacking him directly, you expose his weakness, show his allies that he's unreliable? How? He's made promises to the Castellanos, probably promised them resources, connections, support. If those promises turn out to be empty, if Antonio fails to deliver, the Castellanos will see him as a liability rather than an asset. Adrian's eyes gleamed with understanding. We sabotage his operations, make it look like he's incompetent. Not just incompetent, overextended. hit his supply chains, interfere with his deliveries, create problems that make him look weak. The Castellanos won't want to partner with someone who can't manage his own business. And once the alliance fractures, the Castellanos lose their outside support and have to reconsider whether challenging you is worth the risk. Elena pulled up a map on her tablet. Antonio's main vulnerability is his shipping operation in Salerno. He runs a legitimate import business as cover. If that business starts having problems, customs delays, lost shipments, documentation errors, it affects his entire operation. Adrian studied the map, his mind clearly working through the possibilities. We have contacts in the Port Authority. It would be relatively simple to create bureaucratic nightmares for his shipments. Not all of them, Elena cautioned. Just enough to make him unreliable. Maybe 1 in 3 shipments gets delayed. His customers get frustrated, his reputation suffers, and the Castellanos start wondering if they backed the wrong partner. This is brilliant. Adrian looked at her with something close to admiration. You don't think like a professor, Elena. You think like what? Like someone who belongs in this world. The words settled between them, heavy with implication. Elena knew he was right, and that knowledge both thrilled and terrified her. I'll set it in motion, Adrian said. We'll start with the Port Authority contacts, then expand to other pressure points. Within 2 weeks, Antonio Savastano will be too busy dealing with his own problems to support the Castellanos. Over the following days, Elena watched her strategy unfold with precision. Antonio's shipments started experiencing inexplicable delays. Documentation went missing. Customs inspections became suddenly thorough. None of it was overtly sabotage. Everything had the appearance of bureaucratic inefficiency and bad luck. But the cumulative effect was devastating. Elena monitored the communications between Antonio and the Castellanos, watching as confidence turned to frustration and then to doubt. The language patterns were unmistakable. The alliance was fracturing. He's making excuses, she reported to Adrian during their evening briefing. Blaming the Port Authority, claiming it's temporary. But the Castellanos are starting to question his competence. Good. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Elena. They'll withdraw their support within the week. These evening sessions had become something more than work meetings. They would discuss strategy, yes, but the conversations had started ranging into other territory. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, the philosophies that shaped their worldviews. Elena had learned that Adrian spoke 4 languages, that he'd studied economics at university before circumstances forced him into the family business, that he read voraciously and could discuss Machiavelli with the same fluency he applied to shipping manifests. Why did you choose this life? She asked one evening, the question escaping before she could censor it. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I didn't choose it. My father built this organization, and when he died, I inherited it. I was 23, still planning to do something legitimate with my economics degree. Instead, I got an empire built on blood and fear. You could have walked away. Could I? His smile was bitter. The organization would have collapsed without strong leadership. Rivals would have carved up the territory. Everyone who depended on my father's protection would have been vulnerable. So I stepped in, told myself it would be temporary, that I'd find a way to transition into legitimate business eventually. And I discovered I was good at it. Better than my father, actually. He ruled through fear. I rule through strategy. Adrian met her eyes. People think I'm ruthless, and they're right. But I'm ruthless in service of stability. Every decision I make is calculated to minimize chaos, protect my people, and maintain order. That's how you justify it. That's how I sleep at night. He took a sip of wine. What about you, Elena? How do you justify working for someone like me? It was a fair question, one she'd asked herself countless times. I tell myself I'm minimizing harm, that my analysis helps you make more precise decisions, avoid unnecessary violence. It's probably a rationalization, but it's the one that lets me keep doing this work. Is that the only reason you stay? Elena's heart skipped. What other reason would there be? Adrian set down his glass and moved closer. You're brilliant, Elena. You could work anywhere, for anyone. But you choose to stay here, in my world, despite knowing exactly what I am. Maybe I'm curious, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I want to understand how power really works, stripped of all the polite fictions. Or maybe, Adrian said quietly, you stay for the same reason I look forward to these evenings. The same reason I find excuses to work late when I know you'll still be here. The confession hung between them, dangerous and thrilling. Elena knew she should retreat, maintain professional distance, protect herself from the consequences of this attraction. Instead, she leaned forward. Adrian's hand came up to her face, his touch gentle despite the power she knew he wielded. If we do this, he said, everything changes. I know. You could get hurt. Emotionally, physically, my enemies would see you as leverage. I'm already leverage, Elena pointed out. I already know too much to ever truly be safe. The only question is whether we're honest about what's happening between us. Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip, and Elena's breath caught. The restraint she'd seen him exercise in every aspect of his life was crumbling, and she was both the cause and the beneficiary. I don't do relationships, he said. This life doesn't allow for them. Then don't think of it as a relationship. Think of it as what? Elena searched for words. As two people who understand each other finding something real in a world built on lies. Adrian smiled at that, a genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded features. Then he kissed her. The kiss was nothing like Elena had imagined. It wasn't gentle or exploratory. It was fierce, consuming, months of restrained attraction, finally given permission to exist. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers gripped his shoulders. And for a moment, the entire world narrowed to the taste of wine on his lips and the feeling of being wanted with an intensity that bordered on desperate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Absolutely. We should stop. We should. Neither of them moved. Elena! Her name on his lips was part question, part surrender. If we do this, if we let this happen, I can't promise you safety or normalcy or any of the things you deserve. I stopped wanting safety the day I walked into your world, Elena said. And I've never wanted normal. What do you want? She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I want to be seen. I want my mind to matter. I want to wake up every day feeling alive instead of just existing. She paused. And I want you. The last three words were a leap off a cliff, a surrender to something she'd been fighting for months. Adrian's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something darker, more possessive. Then you have me, he said simply, and kissed her again. Later, much later, they lay together on the leather sofa in his office, Elena's head on Adrian's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. The practical part of her mind was already cataloging complications, how this would change their working relationship, what his organization would think, how much danger she'd just invited into her life. But the rest of her, the part that had been starving for exactly this kind of connection, felt only satisfaction. What are you thinking? Adrian asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. That I've made a series of increasingly questionable decisions since the day I met you. She felt him laugh, a low rumble in his chest. Regrets? Not even a little. Elena shifted to look at him. But we need to be smart about this. Your enemies can't know. Your people can't see this as a weakness. Agreed. Adrian's expression turned serious. In public, in front of the organization, you're still Dr. Vitale, my strategic analyst. What happens between us stays private. Can you do that? Separate the personal from the professional? I've been separating different parts of my life for years, Elena. I can do this. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Can you? Elena considered. Could she maintain professional distance during the day while allowing this intimacy in private? It would require discipline, careful boundaries, the ability to compartmentalize in ways she'd never needed before. Yes, she said. I can do this. Then we have an understanding. They stayed like that for a while longer, wrapped in each other in the comfortable silence of shared understanding. Finally, practical concerns intruded. I should go home, Elena said reluctantly. It's past midnight. Stay. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Marco can drive you home in the morning. That would be noticed. Let them notice. You've worked late plenty of times before. It was rationalization, and they both knew it. But Elena found she didn't care. She settled back against him, feeling safer than she had any right to feel in the arms of southern Italy's most dangerous man. The following week, Antonio Savastano's alliance with the Castellano family officially collapsed. Elena's strategy had worked perfectly. Antonio's repeated failures to deliver on promises had made him a liability. The Castellanos withdrew their support, and faced with Adrian's obvious strength and their own isolation, chose to respect existing territorial boundaries. The crisis was averted without a single shot fired. "You saved lives," Adrian told Elena as they reviewed the final communications. A more conventional approach would have meant violence, retaliation, escalation. Your strategy neutralized the threat cleanly. "Our strategy," Elena corrected. She'd gotten better at accepting credit, but old habits died hard. They were in her office, ostensibly reviewing reports, but mostly just enjoying each other's presence. In the 2 weeks since they'd first crossed the line from professional to personal, they'd established a careful rhythm. During the day, in front of others, they maintained perfect professional distance. But in private moments like this, they allowed themselves to be honest. "There's something else," Adrian said, his tone shifting. "I need to attend a summit in Rome next month. All the major families discussing territorial agreements and cooperation. I want you there." Elena looked up in surprise. "As your analyst?" "As my partner." He caught her expression and clarified. "Business partner. Publicly, you'll be there as my strategic advisor. But I need someone I trust completely at my side during those negotiations. The other families will have questions about me. Let them question. Your presence sends a message that I have resources they don't. Intelligence capabilities beyond their understanding. It's a subtle form of intimidation." Elena considered the implications. Attending a summit of crime families would push her even deeper into Adrian's world, make her complicity even more explicit. It was another step away from the life she'd once imagined for herself. "When do we leave?" she asked. Adrian's smile suggested approval. 2 weeks. It's 3 days in Rome, meetings during the day, social events at night. You'll need appropriate clothes for both. I don't exactly have a wardrobe suited for hobnobbing with crime lords. Then we'll get you one. He pulled out his phone. I'll have someone come to the villa tomorrow with options. Consider it a business expense. The next day, Elena found herself being fitted for clothes that cost more than her monthly salary as a professor. Evening gowns, tailored suits, shoes that were works of art. The stylist, an elegant woman named Claudia, moved around her with pins and fabric samples while offering commentary. "You have excellent bone structure," Claudia said. "We'll emphasize that. And the color. Let's try emerald green. It will make your eyes look extraordinary." Elena caught sight of herself in the mirror, wearing a gown that transformed her from academic to something else entirely. She looked powerful, confident, dangerous. She looked like she belonged in Adrian's world. "Perfect," Claudia announced. "Signor Romano has excellent taste." That evening, Adrian came to her office with an update on the Rome summit. "I've been thinking about strategy," he said. "The summit is an opportunity not just to maintain peace, but to identify potential threats. I want you analyzing everyone, their words, their body language, their interactions with each other. You want me to profile the other crime families. I want you to help me understand the landscape. Who's planning expansion? Who's feeling vulnerable? Who might be open to deeper alliances?" Adrian moved to stand behind her chair, his hands resting on her shoulders. "You see patterns no one else sees, Elena. That's going to give us an enormous advantage." Elena leaned back into his touch. "What if they realize what I'm doing?" "They won't. They'll see you as decoration, a beautiful woman I've brought to impress them. They won't understand that you're the most dangerous person in the room." The assessment sent a thrill through her. Was that what she'd become? Dangerous? "Tell me about the families who'll be there," she said. Adrian spent the next hour briefing her on the major players: the Constantino family from Rome, the Benedetti organization from Milan, the Rossini clan from Palermo. Each had their own territories, their own operations, their own codes of behavior. The summit was a rare gathering where they set aside immediate conflicts to discuss larger issues affecting all of them. "The key figure to watch is Enzo Constantino," Adrian said. "He's old school, traditional, and he controls most of Rome's underground economy. If he decides you're a threat or an insult to his values, it could create problems. What are his values? He believes women belong in domestic roles, not business. He'll be offended by your presence at the negotiations. Elena smiled coldly. Then I'll make sure to give him a reason to feel offended. Adrian laughed at that, genuine and surprised. You've changed since the day you first approached me outside that restaurant. Have I? The woman who asked for 5 minutes of my time was desperate and terrified, even if she hid it well. Now you're talking about deliberately antagonizing one of the most powerful men in Italy. Elena considered that. Maybe you bring out my worst impulses. Or maybe, Adrian said quietly, I help you become who you were always meant to be. The words settled over her like a revelation. Was that what was happening? Was she finally becoming the version of herself she'd always suppressed? The one who wanted power and purpose more than safety and approval? I need to tell you something, Elena said suddenly. The university sent another email asking when I'm planning to return. I've been avoiding answering. What do you want to tell them? That I'm not coming back. The decision crystallized as she spoke. I can't go back to analyzing dead languages after this. It would feel like suffocating. Adrian's hands tightened on her shoulders. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Elena turned to face him. This work, this life, it matters in a way academic research never did. I'm using my mind for something immediate and vital. I'm not just documenting history, I'm helping shape it. You understand what you're choosing. Once you fully commit to this world, there's no clean exit. You'll always be connected to me, to this organization, to decisions that have life and death consequences. I know. Elena stood, meeting his eyes. And I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you. The kiss that followed was different from their previous ones, less desperate, more certain. This was a claiming, a mutual acknowledgement of what they were building together. When they finally separated, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I need to tell you something too. Something I've never told anyone. What? I didn't just inherit this organization. I transformed it. My father ruled through fear and violence, always reacting, never planning. I changed that. I brought in strategic thinking, long-term planning, calculated moves instead of emotional reactions. He paused. But I've always been alone in that transformation. Until you. Elena understood what he was offering, not just a personal connection, but a true partnership. Someone who understood his approach, who thought the way he thought, who could help him build something more sophisticated than simple criminal enterprise. We're going to build something extraordinary, she said. Yes, Adrian agreed. We are. The flight to Rome departed from a private airfield outside Naples, the kind of place where customs officials looked the other way, and passenger manifests remained conveniently vague. Elena boarded the sleek jet wearing one of her new suits, charcoal gray with emerald accents, and felt the weight of transformation settle over her like armor. She was no longer Dr. Elena Vitale, linguistics researcher. She was Adrian Romano's strategic partner, walking into a room full of Italy's most dangerous men with her head high and her mind sharp. Nervous? Adrian asked as the plane lifted off, the Bay of Naples falling away beneath them. Should I be? Most people would be. He poured them both whiskey from the plane's well-stocked bar. But you're not most people. Elena accepted the glass, studying the amber liquid. Tell me more about Enzo Constantino. If he's going to be a problem, I want to understand him completely. Adrian settled into the leather seat across from her, his expression thoughtful. Enzo is 73 years old and has controlled Rome for almost 50 years. He believes in the old ways, respect, hierarchy, tradition. Women in his organization handle money laundering and legitimate business fronts, but they never participate in strategic decisions. He's going to hate me on sight, probably, but his opinion matters less than you think. The younger generation respects results over tradition. If you demonstrate value, they'll accept you regardless of what Enzo thinks. And the others? The Benedetti family from Milan? Carlo Benedetti is 45, Harvard-educated, runs his operation like a Fortune 500 company. He'll be curious about you, possibly see you as validation of his more modern approach. Adrian took a sip of his drink. His sister Francesca handles their intelligence operations. She might actually appreciate what you do. Elena made mental notes, already constructing profiles. The Rossini clan from Palermo? Traditional like Enzo, but younger. Antonio Rossini is in his 50s, pragmatic rather than ideological. He'll judge you based on results, not gender. Adrian's gaze sharpened. But don't underestimate any of them, Elena. These men have survived decades in a world where mistakes are fatal. They're all brilliant in their own ways. I understand. There's one more person you need to know about. Adrian's tone shifted, became more guarded. Valentina Nero. She's not family leadership, but she's Enzo's goddaughter and his most trusted advisor. If anyone at this summit will see you as competition, it's her. Something in Adrian's voice made Elena pay closer attention. You know her. We were engaged once, years ago, before I took over the organization. Elena felt an unexpected jolt of something that might have been jealousy. What happened? Her ambition exceeded her affection. She wanted to merge our organizations, create a Roman-Neapolitan alliance that would dominate central Italy. When I refused, she ended things and went back to Rome. Adrian met Elena's eyes. She's brilliant, ruthless, and she doesn't forgive easily. Seeing me with you will be interesting. Interesting how? Valentina believes I'm incapable of trusting anyone completely. Bringing you to this summit, giving you access to strategic discussions, treating you as an equal, it challenges everything she thinks she knows about me. Elena processed this information, understanding the subtext. She'll try to drive a wedge between us. She'll try. Whether she succeeds depends on how strong our partnership really is. The challenge in his words was clear. This summit would test them in ways that went beyond business strategy. Elena reached across the narrow space between their seats and took Adrian's hand. I'm not going anywhere, she said quietly. His fingers tightened around hers. Good, because I'm going to need you sharp in there. The summit isn't just about maintaining peace. It's about identifying opportunities, understanding threats, and positioning ourselves for the future. They spent the rest of the flight reviewing dossiers on the attending families, with Elena absorbing details about operations, territories, and interpersonal dynamics. By the time they landed in Rome, she had a comprehensive mental map of the landscape they were entering. The hotel was obscenely luxurious, the kind of place where billionaires and royalty stayed when visiting the Eternal City. Their suite occupied the entire top floor, with views of the Vatican and the Colosseum that probably cost more per night than Elena used to make in a month. The opening reception is tonight, Adrian said as they settled in. Cocktails, light conversation, everyone sizing each other up. The real negotiations start tomorrow. Elena moved to the window, looking out over Rome's ancient skyline. Somewhere out there, the other families were arriving, preparing their own strategies, sharpening their own knives. She should have felt intimidated. Instead, she felt ready. The reception was held in a palazzo that had probably witnessed 5 centuries of intrigue and power plays. Elena entered on Adrian's arm, wearing the emerald gown Claudia had selected, and felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Let them look, Adrian murmured. Let them wonder. At Enzo Constantino held court near the marble fireplace, surrounded by older men who clearly still believed in traditional hierarchies. He was shorter than Elena expected, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. When those eyes landed on her, the disapproval was immediate and obvious. Adrian, Enzo said as they approached, his tone coolly polite. You bring interesting guests to our gathering. Dr. Elena Vitale is my strategic advisor, Adrian replied smoothly. I thought her expertise would be valuable during our discussions. Strategic advisor. Enzo's gaze raked over Elena with barely concealed disdain. How modern of you. Elena recognized the test. She could respond with deference, trying to win Enzo's approval through submission, or she could stand her ground and accept his enmity as the price of respect. Modern problems require modern solutions, she said calmly. The world has changed significantly since your generation established the current territorial agreements, Signor Constantino. Adaptation is survival. Enzo's eyes narrowed. Careful, young woman. Tradition has kept us strong for decades. Abandoning it in favor of novelty is dangerous. I didn't suggest abandoning tradition. I suggested supplementing it with analysis and strategic thinking. Elena held his gaze. The strongest organizations are those that honor their foundations while remaining flexible enough to evolve. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Enzo smiled, a cold expression that held no warmth. Articulate, he said. We'll see if your analysis proves as sharp as your tongue. As they moved away, Adrian's hand pressed briefly against the small of her back. Approval and warning combined. You made an enemy, he said quietly. I made an impression. There's a difference. The evening continued with a careful dance of conversations and observations. Elena met Carlo Benedetti, who was indeed intrigued by her presence, and asked intelligent questions about her analytical methods. His sister Francesca proved sharp and calculating, assessing Elena with the kind of professional interest that suggested future alliance rather than rivalry. Antonio Rossini was gruffly polite, more interested in discussing business prospects than debating gender roles. His sons were harder to read, watching Elena with curiosity mixed with uncertainty about how to categorize her. And then there was Valentina Nero. She approached near the end of the reception, moving with the confidence of someone who knew her power and beauty. Valentina was striking rather than conventionally pretty, with sharp features and darker eyes that held calculated intelligence. Adrian, she said warmly, kissing both his cheeks in greeting. It's been too long. Valentina, you look well. And you look different. Valentina's gaze shifted to Elena with predatory interest. Is this the mysterious Dr. Vitale everyone's discussing? Elena, this is Valentina Nero. She advises Enzo on strategic matters. How fascinating, Valentina said, her smile sharp. We have so much in common, Dr. Vitale. Both of us advising powerful men, navigating a world that doesn't always appreciate female intelligence. Elena recognized the approach, establishing common ground before launching the real attack. Indeed, though I suspect our methods differ significantly. Do they? I'd love to compare notes. Valentina linked her arm through Elena's with practiced familiarity. Adrian, you don't mind if I borrow your advisor for a moment, do you? Before Adrian could respond, Valentina was guiding Elena toward the terrace, away from the crowd and watchful eyes. The Roman night was cool, the city glittering below them like scattered diamonds. Let me be direct, Valentina said, dropping the pretense of friendliness. Adrian and I have history, complex, unresolved history. You're very pretty and apparently quite smart, but don't make the mistake of thinking you understand him. I don't think I understand him completely, Elena said calmly, but I don't need to. I trust him and he trusts me. That's sufficient. Valentina laughed, a brittle sound. Trust. How quaint. Adrian doesn't trust anyone, Dr. Vitale. He uses people brilliantly, rewards them generously, but trust? That requires vulnerability he's incapable of. Then you don't know him as well as you think. I know him better than anyone alive. I know what drives him, what haunts him, what he'll never admit even to himself. Valentina moved closer, her voice dropping. He brought you here to prove something to himself, to show that he's evolved beyond the limitations I accused him of. But when this summit is over and reality settles back in, you'll discover that proximity to power isn't the same as possessing it. Elena met Valentina's gaze steadily. Are you finished? Excuse me? With your performance. The warnings disguised as wisdom, the subtle undermining, the attempt to make me doubt my position. Elena smiled coldly. It's well executed, I'll give you that. But it won't work. Valentina's expression hardened. You have no idea what you've walked into. I know exactly what I've walked into. A world built on calculated violence, strategic deception, and power dynamics that would make Machiavelli proud. I'm not naive, Valentina. I'm just better at this than you expected. For a long moment, they stared at each other, two women who understood strategy and power, recognizing each other as genuine threats. We'll see, Valentina finally said. The summit has only just begun. She walked away, leaving Elena alone on the terrace. Adrian appeared moments later, his expression questioning. That looked intense, he said. She tried to rattle me. It didn't work. Elena turned to face him. She's still in love with you, you know, or at least in love with the idea of what you could have built together. Valentina loves power, not people. If she wants me, it's because an alliance between our organizations would make her one of the most influential women in Italy. And me? What do I make you? Adrian pulled her close, his hand settling on her waist. Dangerous, powerful, complete. The kiss was brief but intense. a reminder of what they'd built in the months since Elena first walked into his world. When they separated, both were breathing harder. "We should go back inside," Elena said reluctantly. "People will talk." "Let them." But Adrian released her, smoothing his jacket. "Tomorrow, the real work begins. Are you ready?" "I was born ready." The negotiations started at 9 the next morning in a conference room that probably hosted corporate mergers and diplomatic treaties. The major families gathered around a massive table, with advisors and security positioned along the walls. Elena sat to Adrian's right, her tablet open and recording device subtle. Her role was officially to take notes, but everyone in the room understood she was analyzing far more than that. Enzo Constantino opened the proceedings. "We gathered to discuss three primary issues. First, the increasing pressure from federal law enforcement and how we coordinate our responses. Second, territorial disputes that have arisen in the past year. Third, opportunities for cooperation that benefit all families." The discussion that followed was fascinating. These men, and Francesca Benedetti, who held her own against the testosterone, were brilliant strategists who understood nuance and long-term thinking. They spoke in careful euphemisms, never explicitly acknowledging illegal activities, but the subtext was crystal clear. Elena listened, observed, and analyzed. She noted who deferred to whom, who interrupted, who formed natural alliances in the discussion. She watched body language, tracked word choices, identified the unspoken tensions beneath polite discourse. Carlo Benedetti proposed a coordinated legal defense fund, pooling resources to hire the best attorneys and protect members from prosecution. Antonio Rossini suggested establishing protocols for disputed territories to avoid violent confrontations. Adrian advocated for shared intelligence about law enforcement activities. All reasonable suggestions that masked deeper power plays. During a break, Francesca Benedetti approached Elena. "You're very quiet," she observed. "Most advisors feel compelled to demonstrate their value through constant input." "I demonstrate value through quality of insight, not quantity of words," Elena replied. Francesca smiled approvingly. "I like you. Enzo thinks you're an abomination. Valentina sees you as a threat. But I think you're exactly what this world needs. Someone who understands that intelligence matters more than tradition." "You're in a similar position." "Yes and no. I have the advantage of family blood. My brother would never exclude me from strategic decisions because we built this organization together." Francesca's expression turned serious. "But you're an outsider who's earned her place through merit. That's actually more impressive." After the break, the discussions turned to territorial disputes. Two families had overlapping claims in a lucrative port city, and tensions had been escalating. The debate grew heated, with both sides presenting their historical claims and current investments. Elena saw the pattern before anyone else. She leaned close to Adrian and whispered her analysis. He listened, nodded, then raised his hand for attention. "If I may suggest an alternative approach," Adrian said, "rather than arguing about who deserves the territory, perhaps we should examine who can best utilize it for mutual benefit." Enzo scowled. "Territories aren't assigned based on efficiency, Adrian. They're based on legitimate claims and respect for established boundaries." "With respect, Signor Constantino, that thinking is precisely why these disputes become violent. We're operating like medieval kingdoms instead of modern enterprises." Adrian nodded to Elena. She took a breath and stood, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I've analyzed the economic data for the disputed territory," she said clearly. "Family A has stronger historical claims but limited port infrastructure. Family B has better logistics capabilities but weaker local connections. Neither alone can maximize the territory's potential." "Your point?" Antonio Rossini asked. "A partnership. Family. A maintains territorial control and local relationships. Family B handles logistics and distribution. They split profits proportional to their contributions, and both benefit more than either would operating independently." The room fell silent. Elena could feel Enzo's disapproval radiating from across the table, but she also saw calculation in Carlo Benedetti's eyes, and interest in Antonio Rossini's expression. "It's an interesting proposal," Carlo said slowly. "It challenges tradition, but it also acknowledges reality. We're stronger cooperating than fighting." It's weakness disguised as innovation, Enzo countered. Next, you'll suggest we abandon territories altogether and become some kind of criminal corporation. What's wrong with efficiency? Francesca asked. We waste enormous resources on territorial disputes that benefit no one except our enemies. A more collaborative approach could strengthen all of us. The debate continued, but Elena had shifted the framework. Instead of arguing about who deserved what, they were now discussing how to maximize collective benefit. It was a fundamental change in perspective, and she could see several of the younger leaders embracing it. By lunch, a compromise had been reached. Not exactly Elena's proposal, but incorporating elements of cooperation that wouldn't have been considered without her intervention. You made yourself valuable today, Adrian told her quietly as they left the conference room. Several families will want access to your analytical capabilities. I work for you exclusively. I know, but they don't need to know that yet. His smile was predatory. Let them wonder. Let them worry about what other insights you might have. That evening's social event was a formal dinner at a restaurant with Michelin stars and a guest list of people who would never appear on any official documentation. Elena wore a different gown, black this time, elegant and severe, and played her role perfectly. She was charming but not overly friendly, intelligent but not threatening, beautiful but not available. She moved through the evening like a chess piece, always aware of the board and her position on it. Valentino watched her with barely concealed frustration. Enzo ignored her pointedly, but Carlo, Francesca, and even Antonio treated her with a respect that suggested they recognized her value. You're enjoying this, Adrian observed during a quiet moment. I am. Is that terrible? It's honest. He took her hand, a public gesture that would be noticed and discussed. You're a natural at this, Elena. You read people, understand power dynamics, know exactly how to position yourself for maximum effect. I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you this. I just gave you permission to be who you already were. The comment settled over her with the weight of truth. Elena had spent her entire academic career suppressing her instincts for power and strategy, channeling them into safe pursuits like analyzing dead languages. Adrian had simply removed the constraints and let her natural abilities flourish. On the third day, the summit concluded with agreements on law enforcement coordination, territorial protocols, and several cooperative ventures. Elena had contributed significantly to the frameworks, her analytical approach influencing outcomes in ways that would ripple through Italy's underworld for years. As they prepared to leave, Enzo Constantino approached for a final conversation. You've made quite an impression, Dr. Vitale, he said, his tone still disapproving but grudgingly respectful. I still believe your presence here violates important traditions, but I cannot deny that your insights proved valuable. Thank you, Signor Constantino. I appreciate your honesty. Don't mistake acknowledgement for acceptance. I still believe women have no place in strategic leadership of our organizations. He glanced at Adrian, but perhaps I'm simply too old to adapt to changing times. After he walked away, Elena felt a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. She'd proven herself in one of the most challenging environments imaginable, earned grudging respect from men who'd built empires on blood and cunning. But she'd also lost something irreplaceable, the ability to pretend she was anything other than what she'd become. The flight back to Naples was quiet, both of them processing the summit's implications. As the plane descended toward home, Adrian broke the silence. There's something I need to tell you, he said. One of the cooperation agreements we finalized. It's going to require significant organizational changes. I'll need to spend the next few months restructuring operations, traveling more, being less accessible. Elena felt a chill. What are you saying? I'm saying this is about to get more complicated. The summit succeeded because we demonstrated strength and innovation, but implementing those agreements will test both. We'll have less time together, more scrutiny from rivals, increased pressure from law enforcement. He met her eyes. I need to know you're prepared for that. I'm prepared for whatever comes. Are you? Because this is the moment when most people realize the cost of this life exceeds the benefits. When the excitement fades and the danger becomes real. Elena understood what he was really asking. Was their relationship strong enough to survive stress, separation, and increased threat? Could they maintain their partnership when circumstances made it difficult? She reached across the narrow space and took his hand. I didn't come this far to quit when things get challenging, she said. We're building something extraordinary, Adrian. I'm not walking away from that. His fingers tightened around hers. Even if it means more danger? Even if staying with me makes you a target? I became a target the moment I walked into your world. At least now I have the tools to fight back. Adrian pulled her close, kissing her with an intensity that spoke of relief and possession combined. When they separated, both were breathing hard. There's one more thing, he said. After we land, there's a situation requiring immediate attention. One of our operations was compromised. Someone on the inside provided information to a rival family. Elena's analytical mind immediately engaged. Do you know who? We have 3 suspects. I need you to analyze their communications, identify the traitor. How long do I have? 24 hours. Then I have to act, with or without certainty. As the plane touched down in Naples, Elena felt the familiar rush of purpose flood through her. This was what she'd chosen, a life where every decision mattered, where her intelligence was a weapon, where the stakes were always life and death. The analytical work consumed her entire night. Adrian provided access to months of communications from the 3 suspects, and Elena dove in with the focused intensity that had made her valuable. By dawn, she had her answer. The traitor was revealed not through dramatic confession, but through subtle patterns in word choice and timing. Small deviations from baseline behavior, microscopic tells that accumulated into certainty. Elena compiled her evidence and presented it to Adrian with absolute confidence. It's him, she said, indicating the 3rd suspect. The linguistic markers are unmistakable. He's been feeding information to the Castellano family for at least 6 months. Adrian studied her analysis, his expression darkening as he absorbed the implications. You're absolutely certain? As certain as I've ever been about anything. Then we move tonight. He looked at her intently. This is going to be violent, Elena. More so than what happened with Giacomo. Are you prepared for that? Elena had known this moment would come, when her analysis led directly to someone's death, when she couldn't maintain the comfortable fiction that she merely provided information without responsibility for consequences. Yes, she said quietly. I'm prepared. The confrontation happened in a warehouse on the outskirts of Naples, the kind of place where screams wouldn't be heard and bodies could disappear without trace. Elena didn't attend. That line she still wouldn't cross. But she waited at the villa, knowing what was happening, accepting her role in it. When Adrian returned hours later, there was blood on his cuff and exhaustion in his eyes. It's done, was all he said. Elena poured them both whiskey, and they sat in silence, processing what had transpired. She'd proven her value again, identified a threat, and enabled its elimination. But she'd also confirmed her complete complicity in Adrian's world. There was no pretending anymore that she was merely an analyst, detached from consequences. Do you regret it? Adrian asked quietly. Elena considered the question honestly. Did she regret using her skills to identify a traitor who would have caused enormous damage if left undiscovered? Did she regret the death that resulted from her analysis? No, she said finally. I don't regret it. That probably makes me a terrible person. It makes you a realist. In this world, mercy is often just delayed violence. Quick decisions save lives in the long run. Is that how you justify it? It's how I survive it. Adrian pulled her close. You're in this now, Elena. Completely, irrevocably in this. Are you still sure it's what you want? Elena thought about her old life, the university, the research, the safe and predictable existence she'd abandoned. She thought about who she'd been before meeting Adrian and who she'd become since. I've never been more sure of anything, she said. As they sat together in the quiet villa, watching dawn break over the Bay of Naples, Elena understood that she'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. She was Adrian Romano's partner in every sense. Strategist, advisor, accomplice, lover. She'd traded safety for purpose, respectability for power, and she wouldn't change a single choice. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. The weeks following the traitor's elimination brought a deceptive calm to Adrian's organization. Elena had proven herself beyond any doubt, and the senior lieutenants no longer questioned her presence at strategic meetings. They'd learned that her insights saved lives and prevented disasters, that her analytical mind could see threats invisible to everyone else. But Elena knew better than to trust calm in a world built on shifting alliances and calculated violence. She was reviewing communications one morning when she noticed something odd, a pattern of messages between Stefano, the shipping division head, and someone outside the organization. The language was innocuous, discussing legitimate business concerns, but the timing was suspicious. Messages clustered around key strategic decisions, always within hours of major meetings. Elena spent 3 days analyzing the communications before bringing her findings to Adrian. She found him in his study, reviewing architectural plans for a new legitimate business venture, a shipping company that would provide legal cover for less legal operations. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. Adrian looked up, immediately attentive. "What kind of problem?" "Stefano is communicating with someone outside the organization. The messages appear harmless, but they're timed to coincide with our strategic planning sessions. I think he's sharing information." Adrian's expression darkened. "Stefano has been with me for 15 years. He was my father's most trusted lieutenant." "Which makes him perfect cover for a long-term intelligence operation." Elena opened her tablet, showing him the analysis. "Look at the pattern. Every major decision we've made in the past 6 months, there's a corresponding communication within 24 hours. Who's he talking to?" "That's the concerning part. The contact uses multiple phones, different messaging platforms, and careful language. Whoever it is knows how to avoid detection." Elena highlighted a specific exchange. "But here, this phrase appears in 3 separate conversations. It's unusual enough to be a code phrase or recognition signal." Adrian studied the data with the focused intensity she'd learned to recognize as him processing strategic implications. "If Stefano is compromised, we need to know who turned him and what information has been shared. We also need to consider that this might be a test," Elena said quietly. "Someone checking to see if our internal security can detect subtle breaches." "You think this is about you, about proving your analytical capabilities aren't as good as we claim." Elena had considered that possibility extensively. "It's suspicious that the breach is just obvious enough for me to detect, but subtle enough to seem like genuine tradecraft. Either Stefano is getting careless, or someone wants us to find this. A trap. Possibly, or a recruitment attempt. Stefano is old guard, loyal to tradition. Maybe someone convinced him that my influence is corrupting the organization, that he's protecting us by sharing information with whoever promises to restore proper order." Adrian stood, moving to the window overlooking the bay. "If you're right about this being a test, then how we respond matters as much as the breach itself. They're watching to see if we overreact, if we trust your analysis enough to act on it, if we can distinguish between genuine threats and manufactured ones." "So what do? "We spring the trap." Adrian turned back to her, his expression calculated and cold. "We feed Stefano false information, something valuable enough to be credible, but specific enough to trace. When his contact acts on it, we'll know who we're dealing with." Elena felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with apprehension. "What kind of information?" "A shipment. We tell Stefano we're moving a high-value cargo through the port on a specific date, complete with security details and routes. If the information is shared, whoever's running him will try to intercept it." "And the actual shipment?" Adrian's smile was predatory. "There won't be one, but there will be a lot of very prepared people waiting to see who shows up looking for it." They spent the next 2 days crafting the perfect false intelligence, valuable enough to act on, detailed enough to seem authentic, but ultimately a fiction designed to expose their enemies. Adrian presented it to his senior staff, including Stefano, during a routine briefing about upcoming operations. Elena watched Stefano's reaction carefully. He showed no obvious signs of deception, asked appropriate questions, appeared genuinely engaged with the logistics. If he was compromised, he was exceptionally good at hiding it. Within 18 hours of the meeting, Stefano had communicated with his outside contact. Elena tracked the message through their surveillance systems, watching the information flow from Stefano to an encrypted channel to parts unknown. "He took the bait," she confirmed to Adrian that evening. "Now we wait to see who comes fishing." The trap was set for a Friday night, with Marco and a carefully selected security team positioned around the fictitious shipment location. Elena monitored communications from the villa, looking for any indication that their enemies were taking the bait. At 11:47 p.m., Movement was detected near the warehouse. "We have contacts," Marco reported through the encrypted channel. 4 vehicles, at least 12 people. They're setting up for an intercept. Adrian leaned over Elena's shoulder, watching the live feed from the surveillance cameras. "Can you identify them?" Elena zoomed in on the license plates, running them through their database. 2 vehicles registered to shell companies tied to the Castellano family. The others are rentals, probably using false identification. "The Castellanos," Adrian's voice was ice. "They're still testing me, still looking for weaknesses. Should Marco engage? Not yet. Let them move in, let them discover there's nothing there. I want to see how they react when they realize they've been played." They watched as the assault team moved into position, professional and coordinated. These weren't street thugs, they were trained operatives, possibly former military or law enforcement. The Castellanos had invested serious resources in this operation. When the team breached the empty warehouse and found nothing but carefully arranged props, the confusion was obvious even through the surveillance feed. They searched methodically, clearly expecting to find either the shipment or evidence of where it had been moved. "Now," Adrian said quietly. Marco's team moved in with precision, surrounding the warehouse and cutting off escape routes. Within minutes, all 12 members of the assault team were detained, their vehicles secured, their communications equipment confiscated. "Bring them to the processing facility," Adrian ordered. "I want to know who sent them and what else they know about our operations." Elena watched the prisoners being loaded into vehicles, her analytical mind already processing implications. "This confirms Stefano is compromised. The question is whether he's a willing participant or being manipulated." There's only one way to find out. Stefano was brought to the villa an hour later, confused and concerned about the late-night summons. Adrian received him in his study, with Elena present but silent, an observer rather than participant in what was about to unfold. "Stefano," Adrian said calmly, "thank you for coming on short notice." "Of course, Adrian. What's this about?" "The shipment we discussed earlier this week. There was a problem." Stefano's expression showed appropriate concern. "What kind of problem?" "Someone tried to intercept it, a Castellano assault team, well armed and well informed about our routes and security protocols." Adrian's tone remained conversational, almost casual. "The kind of information they could only have if someone inside our organization provided it." The color drained from Stefano's face. "You think I don't think, Stefano. I know. We've been monitoring your communications for weeks." Adrian gestured to Elena. "Dr. Vitale identified the pattern of information leakage and traced it directly to you." Stefano looked at Elena with something between betrayal and fear. "You were spying on me?" "I was protecting this organization," Elena said quietly. "That's my job." "Stefano," Adrian said, drawing his attention back. "You have one chance to explain yourself. Who are you working for and why?" For a long moment, Stefano said nothing. Then slowly, the resistance seemed to drain out of him. "Enzo Constantino approached me after the Rome summit. He said your organization was being corrupted, that bringing in an outsider," he glanced at Elena, "was a sign of weakness. He offered to help me protect the traditional way of doing things. By feeding him intelligence about my operations, by keeping him informed about dangerous innovations that could destabilize all the families." Stefano's voice gained strength, conviction. "She's changing you, Adrian, making you soft, making you think like a businessman instead of understanding that our world runs on respect and fear." "And you thought betraying me was the path to restoring proper order?" "I thought," Stefano faltered, "I thought I was saving you from making a terrible mistake." Adrian stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You thought 15 years of loyalty gave you the right to decide what's best for my organization. You thought your traditional values mattered more than your oath to me. You thought wrong." "Adrian, please, you're finished, Stefano. You'll provide us with a complete account of everything you shared with Enzo, every communication, every meeting. Then you'll disappear from Naples and never return. If I see you again, if you contact anyone in this organization, if you so much as breathe in a way that threatens my people, you won't get a second warning." It was mercy, and everyone in the room knew it. By rights, Stefano's betrayal should have earned him the same fate as the traitor Elena had identified before. But Adrian was making a calculated choice, demonstrating that loyalty, even betrayed, still meant something. "You have 24 hours, Adrian continued. Marco will escort you home. Start talking." After Stefano was removed, Elena and Adrian sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Elena spoke. "Enzo was testing us. He turned Stefano to prove that traditional loyalty still matters more than modern strategy. And to undermine you specifically, he can't accept that a woman with no family connections has this much influence." Adrian poured them both whiskey. "He's not wrong to see you as dangerous. You are dangerous to every old man clinging to power through tradition instead of earning it through results." "What happens now? Enzo won't stop with Stefano." "No, he won't. But he also can't move openly without risking the cooperative agreements we established in Rome. So he'll continue testing, probing for weakness, trying to turn my people against the changes you represent." Elena sipped her drink, considering strategies. "Then we need to make it costly for him. Show that attempting to corrupt your organization has consequences beyond just losing an asset." "What do you have in mind?" "Information warfare. Enzo turned Stefano by offering him protection and ideological validation. What if we turn that same approach on Enzo's organization? Identify younger members who are frustrated with traditional limitations, who want more modern operational methods. We don't recruit them as spies, we just plant seeds of doubt about whether the old ways are sustainable." Adrian's expression showed appreciation. Undermine his authority from within while maintaining plausible deniability. Brilliant. It's also risky. If Enzo discovers what we're doing, it could escalate into open conflict. Everything worthwhile is risky. Adrian moved closer, his hand finding hers. "We're building something new here, Elena. An organization that values intelligence over tradition, strategy over brute force, innovation over ritual. Enzo represents everything we're moving beyond." "And Valentina? She was part of this, wasn't she? Working with Enzo to test us?" "Almost certainly. She wants to prove I made a mistake choosing you over her, that our partnership is weakness rather than strength." Adrian pulled Elena against him. "She's going to be disappointed." They stood like that for a moment, drawing strength from each other. Then Adrian's phone buzzed with an update from Marco. Stefano had started talking, providing detailed information about his communications with Enzo. "I need to review his debriefing," Adrian said reluctantly. "I'll come with you. This is my fight too." They spent the next several hours going through Stefano's confession, documenting every piece of information he'd shared with Enzo. The scope was extensive but not catastrophic. Stefano had provided strategic insights and operational details, but not enough to seriously damage the organization. "He was holding back," Elena observed, "providing just enough information to maintain Enzo's trust, but not so much that it would destroy you completely." "Conflicted loyalty," Adrian agreed. "He wanted to undermine my new direction without destroying the organization he'd helped build." "That's why you're letting him live." "That's why I'm letting him run. He's more useful as a known quantity in exile than as a martyr to traditional values." Adrian closed the file. "Besides, killing him would give Enzo exactly what he wants. Proof that my partnership with you has made me cruel instead of strategic." Elena understood the calculation. Every decision Adrian made now was viewed through the lens of their relationship, analyzed for signs that his judgment was compromised. Showing mercy, calculated, strategic mercy, demonstrated strength rather than weakness. The following week brought news that shifted the landscape entirely. Carlo Benedetti reached out through encrypted channels, requesting a private meeting with Adrian. The meeting was held at a neutral location, a yacht anchored in the bay, away from surveillance and interference. Elena accompanied Adrian, her presence now accepted as natural rather than controversial. Carlo greeted them warmly, his sister Francesca joining them on the deck. "Thank you for coming," Carlo said. "What I'm about to discuss needs to remain completely confidential." "You have our discretion," Adrian assured him. "Enzo Constantino is planning to retire within the year. His health is failing, and he knows it. But instead of transitioning power smoothly, he's trying to position Valentina as his successor." Elena and Adrian exchanged glances. This explained much of Enzo's recent behavior, the testing, the attempts to undermine Adrian. the ideological warfare against modernization. Valentina doesn't have the family blood or the organizational support to simply inherit Enzo's position, Francesca added. She needs to demonstrate that she can protect traditional power structures, that she understands old-school politics better than younger, more innovative leaders. Which means making me look weak, Adrian concluded, proving that my modern approach is vulnerable to traditional tactics. Exactly. Carlo leaned forward. She's building alliances with conservative factions in every family, promising to restore proper hierarchies and traditional methods. Your organization, with its emphasis on strategy and intelligence, and with a woman in a position of significant power, represents everything she's arguing against. Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. The Stefano recruitment wasn't just about intelligence gathering, it was about demonstrating that traditional loyalty could be weaponized against modern innovation. And the Castellano assault team was meant to show that your new methods couldn't protect against old-fashioned direct action, Francesca said. When that failed, Valentina lost credibility with the conservative factions. They're starting to question whether she can actually deliver on her promises. Why are you telling us this? Adrian asked. Because Francesca and I believe the future of our organizations depends on adaptation, not tradition worship, Carlo said bluntly. We've watched what you've built with Dr. Vitale. A strategic partnership that values intelligence and innovation. That's the model we want to follow, not Enzo's dinosaur approach. You want an alliance, Elena said. We want a coalition. Families that recognize the world has changed, that law enforcement is getting smarter, that technology has shifted the landscape of power. We need to evolve or we'll be crushed by organizations that adapt faster. Carlo's expression was serious. Valentina represents the past. You represent the future. We're choosing the future. Adrian considered this carefully. An alliance against Valentina and her conservative coalition means open conflict within the broader criminal infrastructure. It could destabilize everything we built at the Rome Summit. The Rome Summit already created instability by forcing old and new philosophies into uneasy cooperation, Francesca countered. Eventually those competing visions have to resolve. Better to control how that resolution happens than let it explode chaotically. What exactly are you proposing? Elena asked. A coordinated demonstration of the superiority of strategic thinking over traditional methods, Carlo said. We identify opportunities where innovation succeeds, where tradition would fail. We document it. We share the results. We prove to the moderate factions that adaptation is survival. And when Enzo retires, we support a successor who shares our vision. Valentina gets marginalized, the conservative factions lose their champion, and the future of organized crime in Italy becomes what we make it. It was an ambitious vision, reshaping the power structure of Italy's criminal underworld through strategic demonstration rather than violent conflict. Elena's analytical mind was already processing the possibilities and risks. We need time to consider this, Adrian said. The implications are significant. Take a week, Carlo agreed. But understand, Valentina is already moving. If we don't act soon, the conservative coalition will be too strong to counter effectively. On the drive back to the villa, Elena and Adrian discussed the proposal in depth. The strategic benefits were clear. An alliance with the Benedetti family would strengthen their position significantly. But it also meant choosing sides in a conflict that could reshape the entire criminal landscape. What do you think? Adrian asked. I think Carlo and Francesca are right about the fundamental conflict between tradition and innovation. Every organization faces this choice: adapt or become irrelevant. Elena looked out at the passing coastline. But I also think we need to be careful about how we position ourselves. If we're too aggressive in promoting change, we create enemies. If we're too cautious, we miss the opportunity to shape the future. Balance. Strategic positioning. We support innovation and demonstrate its value, but we do it in ways that don't directly threaten every traditional power structure. We show that evolution is possible without revolution. Adrian reached over and took her hand. You know what this means, don't you? If we align with Carlo and Francesca, if we publicly commit to modernizing organized crime, you become even more of a target. Valentina and her supporters will see you as the primary obstacle to their vision. I know, Elena squeezed his hand, but I didn't choose safety when I walked into your world. I chose purpose. This is what that choice looks like. You could still walk away. I could give you protection, resources, a new identity somewhere far from all of this. Could you walk away? No. This is who I am. Then you have your answer. This is who I am now, too. The decision to align with Carlo and Francesca was made 3 days later, after extensive analysis of risks and opportunities. Adrian sent encrypted confirmation, and within a week, the coalition was forming. Families who believed in strategic adaptation rather than blind tradition. Valentina's response was swift and vicious. She used her platform as Enzo's advisor to launch a campaign of whispered character assassination against Elena. The story spread through the criminal underworld like poison, that Elena was a government informant, that she was manipulating Adrian for personal gain, that her analytical methods were just sophisticated ways of creating leverage for future betrayal. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than perception in this world. Elena found herself subject to suspicious glares at meetings, heard the whispers that stopped when she entered rooms, felt the weight of doubt pressing against the credibility she'd worked so hard to build. "She's good," Elena admitted to Adrian one evening. "She's attacking me in ways that are impossible to definitively refute. How do I prove I'm not a government informant when any denial sounds like exactly what an informant would say? You prove it through results, through continued loyalty and demonstrated value." Adrian pulled her close. "Valentina is gambling that doubt will erode trust faster than performance can rebuild it. We prove her wrong by being undeniable." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Intelligence indicated that a major law enforcement operation was being planned, a coordinated strike against multiple families simultaneously. The information came through Elena's network of contacts, pieced together from dozens of small signals and patterns. "They're planning to hit everyone at once," Elena explained during an emergency meeting with the coalition families. "Banking records, shipping operations, legitimate business fronts, everything synchronized to create maximum disruption." "When?" Carlo asked. 2 weeks, possibly less. They're still coordinating between federal and local agencies, but the framework is in place. Francesca leaned forward. "Can we confirm this independently? I've analyzed communication patterns from known law enforcement contacts, cross-referenced with budget allocations and personnel movements. The probability of a major coordinated operation is over 90%. And you trust this analysis?" The question came from one of the traditional family representatives, his skepticism obvious. "I trusted enough to bet my organization on it," Adrian said firmly. "Doctor, Vitalia has never been wrong about pattern analysis. If she says this is coming, it's coming." The coalition voted to implement defensive measures, moving sensitive operations, securing documentation, creating alibis and distance between leadership and actionable intelligence. It was expensive and disruptive, but if Elena was right, it would save them from catastrophic damage. 10 days later, the operation hit exactly as Elena had predicted. Law enforcement moved simultaneously against 7 different families in 4 cities. But the coalition families, forewarned and prepared, had already moved anything incriminating. The raids found legitimate business operations, proper documentation, and absolutely nothing that could support criminal charges. The families who'd ignored Elena's warning weren't as fortunate. 2 traditional organizations suffered significant losses, with multiple arrests and seized assets. The contrast was devastating for Valentina's narrative. Elena hadn't betrayed the coalition families. She'd saved them. Her analysis had been precise and accurate, demonstrating value that went far beyond theoretical strategy. "You destroyed her credibility," Francesca told Elena after the dust settled. "Valentina spent weeks telling everyone you were a government plant. Then you used government intelligence to protect us from government action. The conservative factions don't know how to process that. They'll find another angle," Elena predicted. "Desperation makes people creative." She was right. Valentina's next move was more personal and far more dangerous. Elena was leaving a restaurant after a late dinner when the attack came. 3 men, professional and fast, moving to intercept her before she reached her car. Marco was there immediately, along with 2 other security personnel, and the would-be attackers scattered. But the message was clear. Elena wasn't just a strategic target anymore, she was a physical one. "We're moving you into the villa full-time," Adrian said when he heard about the incident. "No more going back to your apartment, no more predictable routines." That's exactly what Valentina wants, to isolate me, make me look weak and dependent on your protection. I don't care what it looks like. I care about keeping you alive. Adrian's voice was steel. You've made yourself invaluable to our coalition, which means you've also made yourself the highest priority target for our enemies. From now on, you have security with you at all times. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her independence, but she also understood the strategic reality. She'd become too important to risk, too valuable to leave vulnerable. Her expertise had shifted the balance of power, and Valentina knew that eliminating Elena would cripple the modernization movement. Fine, she agreed, but I want to be involved in the security planning. I'm not going to be a passive asset requiring protection. I need to understand the threats and how we're countering them. Agreed. Marco will brief you tomorrow on the full security protocol. That night, lying in Adrian's arms in the villa that had become her fortress and her prison, Elena contemplated how far she'd come. 8 months ago, she'd been a university professor living a safe, unremarkable life. Now she was at the center of a power struggle that could reshape Italy's criminal landscape, valuable enough to protect and dangerous enough to kill. Do you regret it? Adrian asked quietly, echoing a question from months before. Elena thought about her old life, the safety, the respectability, the intellectual satisfaction of academic research. She thought about what she'd gained, purpose, power, partnership with someone who understood her completely. No, she said finally, I regret nothing. Even knowing what's coming, Valentina won't stop until one of us is destroyed. Then we make sure it's her. Elena shifted to look at him directly. We've been reactive, defending against her attacks. It's time to go on the offensive. Adrian's expression showed interest and approval. What do you have in mind? Valentina's power comes from Enzo's support and her promise to restore traditional hierarchies. But Enzo is dying, and tradition is losing ground to innovation. What if we accelerate both processes? Explain. Elena's analytical mind had been processing strategies for weeks, waiting for the right moment to propose what she knew would be controversial. We identify the next generation of leaders in traditional families, younger members who are frustrated with conservative limitations. We don't recruit them against their families. We just show them what's possible with modern methods. Give them tools, share intelligence, demonstrate that strategic thinking produces better results than tradition worship. You want to create a fifth column inside the conservative coalition. I want to make innovation so obviously superior that the next generation chooses it naturally. When Enzo dies and Valentina tries to claim leadership, she'll find that her support has eroded from within. It was a long-term strategy, the kind of patient approach that required months or years to bear fruit. But it was also exactly the kind of thinking that had made Elena invaluable, seeing beyond immediate conflicts to fundamental shifts in power dynamics. It's brilliant, Adrian said. It's also exactly the kind of threat Valentina would kill to prevent. I know, which is why we need to be very, very careful about implementation. They spent the rest of the night planning. Two strategists who thought alike plotting the fall of an enemy who represented everything they'd moved beyond. Elena had never felt more alive, more purposeful, more certain that she'd found exactly where she belonged. The future was coming, and she would help shape it, whatever the cost. The strategy to undermine Valentina's support took 3 months to implement, and it required patience Elena hadn't known she possessed. Working with Francesca Benedetti, she identified 12 younger members of traditional families who showed frustration with conservative methods. They didn't approach these individuals directly. That would have been too obvious, too risky. Instead, they created opportunities for observation. A carefully arranged business meeting where modern analytical methods solved a problem, traditional approaches couldn't. A shared intelligence briefing where strategic thinking prevented a crisis. Small demonstrations of superior methodology that planted seeds without forcing growth. It's working, Francesca reported during a secure video call. 3 of the targets have started asking questions about how we gather intelligence, how we analyze threats. They're not committing to anything, but they're curious. Curiosity is enough, Elena said. We're not trying to recruit them. We're just showing them there's a better way. But while their long-term strategy progressed, immediate threats continued to escalate. Valentina's attempts to eliminate Elena became more sophisticated, more dangerous. A car bomb that Marco's team detected before it detonated. poison in a wine bottle that heightened security protocols caught before it reached her glass. Each attempt was professional, well-funded, and terrifyingly close to success. "She's getting desperate," Adrian said after the fourth assassination attempt in 6 weeks, "which makes her more dangerous." They were in his study, reviewing security footage from the latest incident. Elena watched herself walk past the very spot where, minutes later, a sniper's position would be discovered. The shooter had been detained before taking the shot, but the margin had been razor thin. "We can't just keep playing defense," Elena said. "Every attempt that fails makes the next one more sophisticated. Eventually, something will get through." "What are you suggesting?" Elena had been thinking about this for weeks, weighing options and consequences. "We expose her. Not to the families. They already know she's trying to kill me. We expose her to Enzo." Adrian's expression showed surprise. "Enzo supports her succession. Why would he care that she's eliminating threats to that plan?" "Because there's a difference between strategic elimination of enemies and reckless escalation that threatens the stability he's spent 50 years building." Elena pulled up files on her tablet. "Every assassination attempt against me has risked collateral damage. The car bomb could have killed civilians. The sniper position overlooked a public square. Valentina is so focused on removing me that she's ignoring the first rule of their world: keep the violence contained. You want to make Enzo see her as a liability. I want to make him see what I see, that Valentina's personal vendetta against me is clouding her judgment. She's not thinking like a strategic leader, she's thinking like someone who's already lost control." Elena met Adrian's eyes. Enzo built his empire on calculated violence and careful maintenance of order. Valentina is offering him chaos dressed up as tradition. Adrian considered this carefully. "It's risky. If Enzo doesn't see it our way, we've just revealed our hand without gaining anything. But if he does see it, Valentina loses her most important supporter right when she needs him most." Elena pulled up another file. "And I think I know how to make sure he sees it our way." The plan required precision and perfect timing. Elena spent 2 weeks analyzing Enzo's communication patterns, understanding how he processed information and made decisions. She discovered that he valued personal observation over secondhand reports, that he trusted his own judgment above advisors when he could verify facts directly. "We need to create a situation where Enzo witnesses Valentina's recklessness firsthand," Elena explained to Adrian and the coalition leadership during a secure meeting. "Not through reports or recordings, but in person, in a context he can't dismiss or rationalize away." "How?" Carlo asked. "We arrange a meeting between our coalition and some of the moderate traditional families, neutral ground, discussing cooperative opportunities that benefit everyone. We make sure Enzo is invited as an elder statesman, honoring his legacy, seeking his wisdom." Francesca caught on immediately. "And we make sure Valentina knows about the meeting, but not the full security details. She'll see it as an opportunity to eliminate Elena in a context that embarrasses the modernization movement." Exactly. She'll plan something dramatic, something that proves traditional methods can strike at the heart of innovation. But we'll be ready. And when her attempt fails in front of Enzo himself, he'll see exactly what kind of leader she really is. "You're using yourself as bait," Adrian said quietly. "I'm creating an opportunity for Valentina to reveal her true nature. There's a difference." The look Adrian gave her suggested he didn't agree, but he also understood the strategic value. "The security requirements for this would be extraordinary. We'd need to protect you while making it appear that you're vulnerable. Marco can handle it. He's been protecting me for months. He knows how I move, how I think. It's still dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous. This is just dangerous with purpose." The meeting was scheduled for a villa in the hills outside Florence, neutral territory that belonged to none of the families, rented through intermediaries and secured by coalition forces. The guest list included moderate leaders from 6 different organizations, with Enzo invited as an honored observer representing the traditional old guard. Elena prepared for the meeting with the same intensity she'd brought to the Rome summit. She reviewed profiles, studied relationships, and planned conversation strategies. But underlying all the preparation was the awareness that somewhere Valentina was planning her death. "Promise me you'll stay alert," Adrian said the night before they left for Florence. "Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks." They were in bed, wrapped around each other in the darkness. Elena could feel the tension in his body, the fear he rarely allowed himself to show. I promise I'll be smart about this. But Adrian, we both know this has to happen. Valentina won't stop until one of us is gone. Better to control the circumstances than wait for her to choose them. I can't lose you. The admission was raw, vulnerable in a way Adrian almost never allowed himself to be. You've become too important, not just to the organization, not just to the strategy, to me. Elena shifted to look at him in the dim light filtering through the windows. You won't lose me. We're too good at this, too prepared. Valentina is smart, but she's also emotional. Emotion makes people sloppy. And us? What are we? Elena kissed him, pouring everything she felt into the connection. Love, partnership, absolute certainty in what they'd built together. We're what comes next, the future she's trying to prevent. The drive to Florence took 4 hours, with security vehicles ahead and behind. Elena used the time to review her analysis one final time, checking and rechecking the logic that had led to this plan. You're nervous, Adrian observed. I'm thorough. There's a difference. Elena. He took her hand, making her look at him. If at any point this feels wrong, if the situation deviates from our planning, you abort. Marco will extract you immediately, and we'll find another way. Understood. The villa was stunning. Renaissance architecture updated with modern security. Elena walked the grounds with Marco, identifying sightlines and vulnerability points, confirming that his team had every angle covered. We'll have eyes on you at all times, Marco assured her. The moment anything feels wrong, we move. Valentina is too smart for a frontal assault. Whatever she's planning will be subtle, unexpected. Then we'll be ready for subtle and unexpected. The guests began arriving in the late afternoon. Carlo and Francesca came first, followed by representatives from the moderate families. Each arrival was screened carefully, their security details coordinated with Marco's team to prevent any possibility of infiltration. Enzo arrived at sunset, stepping from his car with the careful movements of someone whose body no longer kept pace with his mind. He looked older than he had at the Rome summit, frailer, but his eyes were still sharp, still missed nothing. Dr. Vitale, he said when Elena greeted him. Still playing at leadership, I see. Still demonstrating its value, Signor Constantino. I hope you'll find today's discussions interesting. I'm sure I'll find them something. The meeting began with presentations about cooperative intelligence sharing, coordinated responses to law enforcement pressure, and opportunities for legitimate business ventures that could benefit all families. Elena participated actively, demonstrating the analytical approach that had become her signature. She was midway through a presentation on communication security when she felt it, the subtle wrongness that preceded violence. Years of living in Adrian's world had taught her to trust that instinct. Her eyes found Marco's across the room. He'd felt it too. Then the windows exploded inward. The assault was perfectly coordinated. Smoke grenades, flashbangs, attackers in tactical gear moving with military precision. But Marco's team was ready, responding instantly with a defensive formation that put Elena at the center of a human shield. "Stay down!" Marco shouted, returning fire at the attackers. Through the chaos and smoke, Elena saw Enzo hit the floor, protected by his own security detail. She saw Adrian move with lethal efficiency, taking down one attacker who'd gotten too close. She saw the carefully planned meeting dissolve into exactly the kind of violent chaos that Valentina had promised would never happen under her leadership. The firefight lasted 90 seconds, an eternity compressed into gunfire and shouted commands. When the smoke cleared, 3 attackers were dead, 2 were captured, and miraculously, none of the family representatives had been seriously injured. "Elena," Adrian was beside her immediately, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. The security worked exactly as planned." Marco was already interrogating one of the captured attackers, his methods efficient and brutal. Within minutes, he had confirmation. Valentina had ordered the assault, promised it would eliminate the modernization leadership while demonstrating the continued strength of traditional methods. Enzo Constantino stood slowly, brushing glass from his suit with shaking hands. His security chief was reporting damage assessment, but Enzo's attention was fixed on the carnage around him. "This," he said, his voice carrying despite its age, "is what Valentina promised would restore order. This reckless violence in a neutral meeting space, risking everyone present to eliminate one person? Elena approached him carefully, aware that this moment would define everything. Signor Constantino, I'm sorry you were endangered. This attack was directed at me, and this attack was directed at everything I built. Enzo's anger was cold and absolute. 50 years I've maintained order, kept the violence contained, protected the infrastructure that allows all of us to operate. And Valentina throws it away because she's afraid of you. She sees me as a threat to traditional power structures. She sees you as a threat to her ambition. There's a significant difference. Enzo looked around the damaged room. I came here skeptical about modernization, about strategic methods replacing time-tested traditions. But you know what I see now? I see that your security protocols saved lives tonight. I see that your preparation anticipated exactly this kind of attack. I see that intelligence and planning matter more than I wanted to admit. Adrian moved to stand beside Elena, a united front. The world has changed, Enzo. We're not abandoning tradition. We're evolving it. And Valentina? Valentina is trying to start a war she can't win, Elena said quietly. Every attempt to eliminate me has been more reckless than the last. Tonight proves she's willing to risk everything, including your life, to maintain her vision of how things should be. Enzo was silent for a long moment, processing implications and consequences. Finally, he turned to his security chief. Find Valentina. Bring her to Rome. I want to have a very serious conversation about judgment and proportionality. After Enzo left, the coalition families gathered in a secure room to assess the situation. The attack had failed spectacularly. Valentina's involvement was confirmed, and Enzo himself had witnessed the recklessness of her methods. She's finished, Carlo said with satisfaction. Once Enzo withdraws his support, the conservative coalition will collapse. They were only unified because they believed Valentina represented the old guard's chosen successor. Don't underestimate desperation, Francesca warned. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Elena knew Francesca was right. Valentina had gambled everything on tonight's attack, her credibility, her support, her future. With all of it gone, she had nothing left to lose. We need to move quickly, Elena said. Establish the new power structure before Valentina can regroup or the conservative factions can rally around someone else. They spent the next 3 hours planning the transition, how Enzo's retirement would be announced, who would succeed him in Rome, how the cooperative agreements would be formalized and expanded. It was delicate work, requiring careful balance between innovation and respect for tradition. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over Florence. Elena stood on the terrace, watching the city wake up, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished. Adrian joined her, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. You did it, he said quietly. You changed everything. We did it. This was never just me. But you were the catalyst, the brilliant mind that saw possibilities no one else could see, the courage to walk into a world that should have destroyed you and instead bend it to your vision. Elena leaned back against him, allowing herself a moment of relief and satisfaction. What happens now? Now we build what comes next. Organizations that value strategy over tradition, intelligence over brute force, cooperation over endless territorial warfare. Adrian turned her to face him. And we do it together. The kiss was tender, a celebration and a promise combined. When they separated, Elena saw Marco approaching with his typical discretion. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but we have a situation. Valentina never returned to Rome. She's disappeared. The satisfaction Elena had been feeling evaporated instantly. Where is she? Unknown. She dismissed her security detail hours before the attack, told them she had personal business. No one has seen her since. Adrian's expression hardened. She's running. We're planning one final move, Elena said. Someone who's lost everything is capable of anything. They returned to Naples that afternoon, with security protocols elevated to their highest level. Elena knew that somewhere out there, Valentina was making calculations, planning revenge, deciding how to strike back at the woman who destroyed her ambitions. 2 days passed with no sign of Valentina. Then, on the third day, Elena received a message through an encrypted channel she'd established for sensitive contacts. The message was simple. Meet me alone, or everyone you love dies. Absolutely not, Adrian said when she showed him. It's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap. But it's also an opportunity to end this once and for all. Elena pulled up a map on her tablet. She specified a location, the old monastery ruins outside Sorrento, public enough that a massacre would be noticed, isolated enough for a private confrontation. You're not going alone. I won't be alone. Marco and his team will be positioned around the perimeter, close enough to respond, but far enough to satisfy Valentina's demand for a personal meeting. Elena, Adrian, listen to me. Valentina is wounded and desperate. She'll keep striking until someone stops her, and every attack will be more dangerous than the last. We can wait for her to choose the time and place, or we can control the circumstances. This is us controlling the circumstances. The argument continued for an hour, but Elena's logic was sound, and they both knew it. Finally, Adrian agreed with conditions. Marco's entire team deployed aerial surveillance and a complete tactical plan with multiple extraction scenarios. The monastery ruins were beautiful in their decay, ancient stone walls crumbling picturesquely against the dramatic coastal backdrop. Elena arrived at sunset, as specified, and walked into the central courtyard alone. Valentina was waiting, looking elegant and composed despite being a fugitive. She stood beside a broken fountain, silhouetted against the dying light. "You came," Valentina said. "I wasn't sure you would." "You threatened people I care about. Of course I came." "Brave and foolish. That's always been your combination." Valentina moved closer, and Elena saw the gun in her hand, held casually but with clear purpose. "You've destroyed everything I built, everything I planned. Enzo has withdrawn his support. The conservative families are in disarray, and my future is ashes. All because you convinced Adrian Romano to value intelligence over tradition." "I didn't convince him of anything. I showed him what was possible when you stop clinging to outdated methods and start thinking strategically. You seduced him." "Let's be honest about what really happened. You used sex and manipulation to gain influence, then leveraged that influence to reshape an entire power structure." Elena felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice calm. "You're projecting your own methods onto me. I never manipulated Adrian. I partnered with him, contributed real value, proved my worth through results. The fact that we also developed genuine feelings for each other doesn't diminish the professional foundation." "Genuine feelings?" Valentina laughed bitterly. "You actually believe that? You think Adrian Romano, the man who trusts no one completely, who spent his entire adult life maintaining absolute control, has genuine feelings for an academic who wandered into his world by accident? It wasn't an accident. I made a choice, and I've made 100 choices since then to stay, to build something meaningful, to become the person I was always capable of being. And what person is that? A criminal's whore who dresses up betrayal as strategy?" The words were designed to wound, to provoke a reaction. Elena refused to give Valentina the satisfaction. "I'm someone who uses her intelligence to shape outcomes instead of just documenting them. I'm someone who found a partner who values my mind as much as anything else. I'm someone who took power instead of begging for it." Elena took a step closer, ignoring the gun. "I'm everything you could have been if you hadn't let ambition override judgment." Valentina's composure cracked slightly. "You don't know anything about me. I know you were brilliant once. Adrian told me about your relationship, about the strategic vision you shared. You could have built something extraordinary together. Instead, you chose power over partnership, ambition over connection. And now you're here, holding a gun on someone you see as inferior, because it's the only power you have left." "I still have the power to end you." "Yes, you do. You can pull that trigger, and I'll die right here in these ruins. Marco's team will kill you seconds later, but I'll still be dead." Elena held Valentina's gaze. "Is that really how you want this to end? Both of us dead, everything we could have accomplished gone because you couldn't adapt when the world changed?" For a long moment, Valentina said nothing. The gun remained steady, but something shifted in her expression. "What's the alternative?" she asked finally. "I've lost everything. Enzo has disowned me, the families won't accept my leadership, and I can't stay in Italy without eventually being eliminated. You're offering me what? Mercy?" "I'm offering you a choice. Disappear. Take the resources you've accumulated and build a new life somewhere far from here. Or stay and fight a war you've already lost, destroying yourself and probably several other people in the process." "Why would you offer me anything?" "Because despite everything, I understand you. I understand wanting power, wanting to matter, wanting to shape the world according to your vision. We're not as different as you want to believe." Elena paused. "The difference is, I found a way to achieve those things through partnership instead of domination. You still can too, just not here, not in this world." Valentina lowered the gun slowly. "You're serious?" "Completely. Adrian and I discussed this. We'll provide safe passage out of Italy, enough money to start over, and a guarantee that no one from the coalition families will come after you. In exchange, you disappear completely. No contact with Italian organizations, no attempts at revenge, no coming back. And I'm supposed to just trust that you'll honor this agreement. You're supposed to recognize that we gain nothing by killing you now that you're no longer a threat. Alive and exiled, you're a cautionary tale. Dead, you're a martyr for the conservative cause." Elena extended her hand. "This is your chance to survive, Valentina. I suggest you take it." For several heartbeats, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge. Then Valentina placed the gun in Elena's hand. A surrender and an acknowledgement combined. "I underestimated you," Valentina said quietly. "I thought you were just another woman using sex to gain influence. I didn't see that you were actually brilliant. That was your mistake. You saw what you expected to see instead of what was really there." Marco appeared from the shadows, along with 3 other security personnel. They'd been close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to allow the conversation to play out naturally. "We'll escort you to the airport," Marco said to Valentina. "A private flight is waiting. Where it takes you is your choice, but it can't be anywhere in Europe." Valentina nodded, her defeat complete, but her dignity intact. As Marco led her away, she paused and looked back at Elena. "Build something worthy of the price you paid for it," she said. "Don't let Adrian's world corrupt what makes you valuable." Then she was gone, walking toward exile and an uncertain future. Adrian emerged from his own position, pulling Elena into a fierce embrace. "You took a terrible risk. I took a calculated risk. There's a difference. She could have killed you. But she didn't. Because despite everything, Valentina is fundamentally rational. She recognized that survival beats revenge." Elena pulled back to look at him. "It's over, Adrian. The conservative coalition is broken, Valentina is gone, and we can finally build what we've been planning." The next 3 months transformed the landscape of organized crime in Italy. With Enzo's blessing, given grudgingly but sincerely, the coalition families formalized their cooperative agreements. Carlo Benedetti assumed leadership in Rome with Francesca as his strategic advisor, implementing many of the innovations Elena had championed. Adrian's organization became the model for the new approach: strategic thinking over traditional methods, intelligence gathering over brute force, long-term planning over reactive violence. Elena's role evolved from secret advisor to acknowledged partner, her analytical capabilities recognized as essential to modern criminal enterprise. The transformation wasn't without resistance. Some traditional families refused to adapt, clinging to old methods even as they became increasingly marginalized. But the overwhelming success of the cooperative approach made resistance increasingly futile. Elena found herself in demand across Italy, families requesting her consultation on strategic planning, communication analysis, threat assessment. She'd become something unprecedented in the criminal underworld, a woman whose expertise commanded respect regardless of traditional hierarchies. But success brought its own complications. The closer Elena became to Adrian's organization, the more difficult it became to maintain any pretense of separation between her professional and personal life. She'd moved into the villa permanently, her old apartment abandoned along with the last remnants of her academic identity. "Do you ever miss it?" Adrian asked one evening as they sat on the terrace overlooking the bay. "The university, the research, the respectability?" Elena considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the clear boundaries between right and wrong, the certainty that I was on the correct side of the law." She took his hand. "But I don't miss feeling invisible. I don't miss knowing that my best work would be read by dozens instead of shaping the world. And I definitely don't miss being alone." "You're not alone anymore." "No, I'm not." Adrian stood, pulling something from his pocket. In the fading light, Elena saw him holding a small box, velvet, antique, clearly containing something significant. "I was going to plan something elaborate," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring set with a deep red ruby surrounded by diamonds. A romantic dinner, a perfect setting, all the traditional gestures. But we've never been traditional, and I don't want to wait any longer. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as Adrian took the ring from the box. You walked into my world to save your father, and you stayed to save yourself. You've transformed my organization, changed how power works in our entire world, and you've made me believe that partnership matters more than absolute control. He met her eyes with absolute sincerity. Elena Vitale, will you marry me? The proposal was everything and nothing like she might have imagined. No pretense, no performance. Just two people who understood each other completely, choosing to formalize what they had already built. Yes, she said, watching him slide the ring onto her finger. Absolutely yes. The kiss that followed was witnessed only by the stars and the ancient bay, a private moment of commitment before the public declarations to come. Their wedding, held 3 months later, was an event that merged two worlds in ways that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Legitimate business leaders mingled with criminal family heads. Politicians who officially knew nothing about Adrian's real operations offered toasts alongside men who controlled Italy's underground economy. Elena wore a gown that made her look like royalty, and as she walked toward Adrian through the gathered assembly, she understood that she'd become exactly that, the queen of a kingdom built on shadows and strategy. The ceremony itself was brief, the vows traditional despite everything else about their relationship being revolutionary. When Adrian kissed her as his wife, the applause came from both worlds she now straddled, the legitimate and the hidden, the lawful and the criminal, the past and the future. At the reception, Enzo Constantino approached to offer congratulations. He looked even frailer than before, his retirement now officially announced, but his mind remained sharp. You've accomplished something remarkable, Dr. Vitale, he said. Or should I say Signora Romano now? Either works, Elena said with a smile. You've changed our world fundamentally. Whether that's ultimately for better or worse remains to be seen, but I can't deny that you've changed it. Enzo's expression became more serious. Adrian's organization is stronger now than when his father ran it, not because of violence or fear, but because of intelligence and strategy. That's your influence. It's our partnership. I provide analysis, he provides leadership. Together we're better than either of us could be alone. Guard that partnership carefully. The world you've built has many who admire it and many who envy it. Both can be dangerous. As Enzo walked away, Adrian appeared at Elena's side, slipping his arm around her waist. Enjoying your wedding? He asked. I'm enjoying the symbolism. All these people from different worlds gathered because of what we've built together. It's remarkable. You're remarkable. Adrian turned her to face him. I have a wedding gift for you, something I've been working on for months. He led her to a quiet corner and handed her a folder. Inside, Elena found documents, legal documents establishing a foundation in her name. I don't understand, she said, scanning the paperwork. The Romano Foundation for Educational Excellence. It will provide scholarships for brilliant students who can't afford university, fund linguistic research programs, and support academic innovation. Adrian's expression was gentle. You gave up your academic career to join my world. This way, you can still contribute to the field you loved, just in a different capacity. Elena felt tears threatening, not of sadness, but of being so completely understood by another person. This is perfect. You're not just my partner in the organization, Elena. You're my partner in everything, including making sure something good comes from the resources we've accumulated. The foundation was just the beginning. Over the following months, Elena discovered that Adrian had been quietly moving the organization toward increasingly legitimate operations. The criminal enterprise that had sustained them was being systematically transformed, money laundered into legal investments, connections leveraged to build proper businesses, power converted from shadow to substance. I want to build something that lasts, he explained one evening as they reviewed the transition plans, something our children could inherit without the weight of criminality. We've proven that strategic thinking and intelligence matter more than violence. The next step is proving they can succeed in legitimate enterprise too. This will take years. We have years, and we have each other. The transformation was far from complete, and Elena understood they'd never be entirely free of their criminal origins. But the direction was clear, towards something more sustainable, more defensible, more aligned with the partnership they'd built. 6 months after the wedding, news came that Enzo Constantino had died peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was attended by hundreds, family members, business associates, and representatives from every major organization in Italy. Elena and Adrian attended together, paying respects to a man who'd represented an entire era of criminal history. "The old world is truly gone now," Adrian said as they left the funeral. "What comes next is entirely up to us." Elena looked out over Rome, thinking about everything that had changed since the day she'd first confronted Adrian outside that Naples restaurant. She'd been desperate then, terrified, gambling everything on a single audacious move. Now she was his wife, his partner, the strategic mind behind an organization that was reshaping how power operated in Italy. She'd gained more than she'd ever imagined possible, and the cost, her respectability, her safety, her innocence about the world's darker corners, seemed small by comparison. "What comes next is what we build together," she said, taking his hand. "Whatever that looks like." As they drove back to Naples, Elena thought about the foundation she now ran, the legitimate businesses they were building, the network of intelligence and influence they'd established. She thought about the young people being educated through her scholarships, the innovations in strategic thinking that were changing not just criminal enterprises but legitimate organizations too. She'd walked into Adrian's world to save her father. She'd stayed to save herself. And in the process, she'd helped transform that world into something new, still dangerous, still operating in shadows, but increasingly oriented toward intelligence over violence, strategy over chaos, building over destroying. The villa appeared in the distance, perched on its cliff above the bay. Home. Their headquarters. The center of everything they'd created together. "Are you happy?" Adrian asked as they pulled through the gates. Elena considered the question from every angle. Was she happy having traded academic respectability for criminal complicity? Was she happy living constantly aware of threats and dangers? Was she happy with choices that put her forever on the wrong side of laws she'd once respected? "Yes," she said finally. "I'm happy. Not because everything is perfect or safe or simple, but because I'm using my mind for something that matters, because I'm partnered with someone who sees me completely, because every day presents challenges that require the full measure of my capabilities. That's all I wanted, for you to choose this life freely, with full knowledge of what it means. I choose it. Every day I choose it." That night, standing on their terrace as stars emerged above the bay, Elena reflected on the journey from that first desperate confrontation to this moment of hard-won peace. She'd become someone she wouldn't have recognized a year ago. Harder, more pragmatic, comfortable with moral complexity that would have paralyzed her academic self. But she'd also become more fully herself than ever before. The intelligence that had been channeled into safe pursuits now shaped real outcomes. The strategic thinking that had been theoretical now prevented violence and saved lives. The hunger for purpose that had driven her academic achievements now drove the transformation of an entire criminal infrastructure. "I've been thinking about expansion," Adrian said, joining her at the railing. "Not territorial expansion, operational expansion. Taking our model beyond Italy, showing that strategic cooperation beats territorial warfare in other markets too. Ambitious. No more ambitious than what we've already accomplished." He pulled her close. "We've proven that intelligence matters more than tradition, that partnership beats domination, that the future belongs to those willing to adapt. The question is how far we take that vision." Elena leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence, the absolute certainty that they were stronger together than either could be alone. "As far as it can go, we build something that outlasts us, that proves power without wisdom is weakness, that creates opportunities instead of just controlling resources. The Romano Empire, version 2.0. The Romano legacy," Elena corrected, "something worth leaving behind." In the months that followed, their vision began taking shape. Strategic partnerships with organizations in other countries, sharing intelligence and methodology, creating a network built on cooperation rather than conquest. The foundation expanded its reach, funding education across Europe. The legitimate businesses grew, providing cover and increasingly becoming the primary source of revenue. Violence didn't disappear, their world would always include that element. But it became increasingly rare, increasingly surgical, increasingly the last resort rather than the first response. Elena's analytical methods proved as effective at preventing conflict as at winning it, and that prevention became the new standard. She'd achieved something unprecedented, becoming indispensable not through force or fear, but through intelligence and strategic vision. The woman who'd once trembled in fear approaching a crime lord now commanded respect across Italy's entire criminal infrastructure. But perhaps most importantly, she'd found genuine partnership with someone who understood her completely. Adrian valued her mind as much as her presence, sought her counsel on every major decision, and built their empire as much around her insights as his own judgment. Standing on the terrace of their villa, watching the sun set over the Bay of Naples, Elena understood that she'd found exactly what she'd been searching for: purpose, partnership, and the power to shape her own destiny. The price had been steep, the risks enormous, the moral compromises significant. But looking at everything they'd built together, everything they were still building, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd make the same choices again. "To the future," Adrian said, raising a glass of wine and toast. "To building something extraordinary," Elena replied, touching her glass to his. As night fell over Naples and the ancient city settled into its rhythms, two people who'd transformed each other and their world stood together, ready for whatever came next. The king and queen of an empire built not on violence alone, but on intelligence, strategy, and the revolutionary idea that partnership could be stronger than domination. Their reign was just beginning,